Announcements by His Honor the Speaker, recommitted.
Reference number 0075 of 10, 12th of October 2021. To His Honor the Speaker of the Honorable House of Assembly, Parliament of Barbados, care of Worthing Corporate Center, Worthing, Christchurch. Dear Mr. Speaker, Section 14, subsection 1 of the Constitution Amendment Act 2021 provides for the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition to no later than the 15th October 2021 nominate a person to be elected as President of Barbados. I have the honor to inform you that Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason, GC, MG, DA, QC, Governor General, has assented to the proposal to be nominated as President and Head of State of Barbados by myself as Prime Minister and by the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Joseph Adderley. I therefore officially advise of you, Mr. Speaker, of the joint nomination of Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason, GC, MG, DA, QC, Governor General, by the Prime Minister of Barbados and the Leader of the Opposition of Barbados in accordance with Section 14, subsection 1 and subsection 2 of the Constitution Amendment Act 2021, signed Mayor Amor Motley, QC, MP, Prime Minister, Bishop Joseph J.S. Adderley, JP, MP, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we revert to government business.
Honorable Member for St. Andrew. Please turn on your mic, sir.
Mr. Speaker, it is fairly obvious that in a debate of this nature, where corruption is center stage, that it would be extremely difficult for any member of the government to oppose any measure for the prevention of corruption. Corruption itself is a threat to democracy in countries where it is rampant. It destroys economies in many countries, and it destabilizes governments. It is true that sometimes when we speak of corruption, we think of what transpires in certain countries in Africa. In some African countries, it is a way of life. It is very sophisticated in certain European countries, even in the European Parliament, where there was a big investigation, and almost all the members of Parliament resigned over a corruption scandal. And it is a very important, Mr. Speaker, however small, however minor corruption in a country like Barbados is, that we nip it in the bud. In this connection, Mr. Speaker, I cannot do otherwise but to support the legislation which is before this House. However, Mr. Speaker, one must, however, look at what informed this legislation and the urgency of it at this particular point in time. You may recall, you yourself as a member of Parliament, in the last general election, where the mismanagement of the government and the alleged corruption by government officers were the talk of the day. I believe that the allegations of corruption in the last administration and the mismanagement of the government contributed in no small part to the fact that the Barbados Labour Party was able to win all 30 seats in Parliament. It was not so much a support 100% for the policies of the Barbados Labour Party, but the members of the electorate, they voted in a manner which showed their anger, for want of a better word, for the mismanagement and the alleged corruption. And, Mr. Speaker, if you may recall, I remember being very much involved in certain constituencies, and I remember the member for St. Michael Northwest being very concerned that he was not getting the support of a number of persons in the not only in the constituency, but a number of MPs were not there to support it. And I remember that I was able to give him a little bit of comfort, because I told him at the time that the Minister of Finance was at the forefront of the, or rather the victim of the allegations of mismanagement and alleged corruption. And what he was getting in St. Michael Northwest was not what the member for St. James South or the member for St. James Central was getting, because the member for St. James Central had to be out there every night trying to encourage people to vote for the Barbados Labour Party, whereas you had in every single constituency every night people attacking the policies of the Democratic Labour Party and the Minister of Finance. Because while there were allegations, they were very, very strong allegations supported by the leader of the Barbados Labour Party. I don't want to document in my brief submission, because I don't plan to speak too long in this debate on this particular matter. But we hammered the Democratic Labour Party. We hammered the government at the time because of the mismanagement and the alleged corruption at that particular point in time. As a result, Mr. Speaker, the people of Barbados, they listened to us, and the Barbados Labour Party government was able to come home, not just the winners, but the people of Barbados, in no uncertain terms, demonstrated their anger and their disgust for the policies of the Democratic Labour Party. Now, we as a government, the Attorney General, in his presentation, did make a point that the people have to feel that this government is theirs. That is one of the comments that he made in this debate. And he also said that the people don't have any confidence in our leaders if they don't carry out the type of promises that they made during the last election. Now, the question of allegations of corruption, the question of corruption is serious. And the question of condemnation of corruption is also serious. So, Mr. Speaker, I, for the life of me, was a little flabbergasted when you could come 2 years after, having attacked the Minister of Finance, having attacked the policies of the Democratic Labour Party, having attacked the mismanagement of the Democratic Labour Party, when you could come and make that same Minister of Finance an advisor in the Barbados Labour Party and as part of an investments council within Barbados Labour Party. But, Mr. Speaker, that speaks, Mr. Speaker, to condemnation. That speaks to a condemnation of the same policies that you attacked during the election campaign. And I say that because as the Attorney General said in his presentation, the people don't have confidence in our leaders. People have to feel that this government is theirs. Now, there are a number of persons who are of the view that immediately after the elections, people are out there immediately after the elections, after we won, what are you going to do? But we had to tell them that the legislative framework was not such that we could go right away and make the type of charges and bring the type of complaints to the courts, which would make them satisfied. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, that is why we are here. And I listened to the honourable member for St. James Central in his presentation, and I agree with him. It is good that we are able to come to this house, and satisfy a promise that we have made. We made the promise to bring the necessary legislation to Parliament so that we would be able to prosecute those persons who could not have been prosecuted under the previous legislation. But, Mr. Speaker, you have to ask yourself whether or not we have succeeded in this particular exercise. I don't think that any of us here in this house would want to be a part or a party to a government that would condone corruption. Mr. Speaker, if, as it stands, Mr. Speaker, we recognize on the political platform that we had made some mistakes with respect to the condemnation of the Minister of Finance, and then we decided that he would be brought into the fold, Mr. Speaker, well then, nothing less than an apology to the people of Barbados has to be the order of the day. So if, in our opinion, that Minister of Finance was wrongly accused or wrongly alleged to be part of the mismanagement and the alleged corruption in the last administration, and we now realize and we now recognize that we were wrong, before we did anything to rehabilitate that particular individual, we should make an apology to the people of Barbados in the same way that we went on the political platforms and make that accusation against that particular individual, because it is unfair. It is unfair to that political individual, the type of allegations. And I recall, as I said, when we went on the political platform, and I told the member for the St. Michael Northwest, you don't have to worry. Every night, every single member of Parliament, we didn't, in those days, at that time, you hardly heard the Prime Minister's name being mentioned, apart from the fact that he was always silent. But the Minister of Finance, his name was mentioned, and within 2 years of the Barbados Labour Party coming to government, he was part of an advisory council within the same government that I condemned it. I am not condemning the Minister of Finance. I sat, like all of us, I heard somebody, I know that some of us, sometimes we tend to think that we should keep our mouth shut when the political leader or the Prime Minister is making certain pronouncements. I am not one of those. And the sad part of it is that we now have a group of new members of Parliament who tend to believe that they should keep their mouth shut at all times. And it's dangerous. It is dangerous, because one of the things that was mooted on the political platform during that period, we are all in this together. Mr. Speaker, I am not part of being in anything together which has anything to do with the condemnation of corruption. So if the honorable member, the Minister of Finance in the last administration, if that minister has been wrongly accused, and you can't repeat it often enough, I think we have a duty to the public of Barbados, because everything that we said on the political platform was on social media, it was in the press, it was all over the place. And as I said, I do not want to be part of an administration that will condone corruption. And if we are not condoning the corruption, well, then the only decent thing to do would be to make an apology to that individual. And if we cannot make an apology to that individual, well, then anything else that happens in terms of corruption and any policies we have to going forward, it means that we would, to a certain extent, in the eyes of the public, we are condoning corruption. And as I said earlier, a lot of people out there, they did not realize that the legislative framework is not such that we could have gone ahead almost immediately and bring any charges against anybody. And the former member for St. James South was not even pilloried on the political platform. Yet his conviction in the United States showed a pattern of behavior. A pattern of behavior. And Mr. Speaker, this whole question of condemnation is what concerns me, because as a member of this government, as a member of this Barbados Labour Party, as one who worked hard, and when I say work hard, I mean real hard, to ensure not just that the Barbados Labour Party win, because to ensure that Barbados Labour Party win all the seats. Because I don't think that they deserve the single seat because of the way how they governed during the 5 years before the Barbados took over on the 24th of May. Mr. Speaker, and I mean, you have to look at the pattern. So if we are bringing legislation with respect to corruption, the people they have to show you, they have to be satisfied. You know, they use the word in the trenches, but you all have to be serious, that you are serious about what you're doing. You have to be serious. In legal jargon, you have to show, as the honourable member for St. James North would say, that you have the moral authority. You can't say you have the moral authority when the same things you are condemning, the same people you are condemning, you're coming back to put them to advise who? To advise who? And to make sure that you put them in a position whereby they can advise other people that government is dealing with. And that's only one instance, there's only one matter, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to call any names, but I think that everybody knows what I'm talking about. I was somewhat shocked in the Ministry of Housing when I realized that it was a project at Coverley. And I'm not going past Coverley because everybody knows what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about. Was practically given to one man. A man who's more or less, I mean, the thing about most of us in this chamber, you know, and as I always tell people, I went to school barefoot. I walked to school barefoot. And when I went to Common, Mary had one pair of shoes and I had to change the shirt with my brother who was in third form. You understand? So, I mean, I don't really, I could go back to feel comfortable going back to those days. So I don't have nothing to worry about. You know, and this is why sometimes I feel, I find it difficult that certain people find it difficult to take a stand. And the thing about most of us in here are paying mortgages. We don't live in Sandy Lane and those other areas, those highfalutin areas, Mr. Speaker. And it is a pity that notwithstanding where we come from, sometimes we like to make sure that certain people enjoy a certain lifestyle. We tend to like to kneel to people who have been accustomed to a certain standard of living. But I was shocked, Mr. Speaker, that people from the same background as the former Minister of Housing and the former government in the last administration could actually give away. I don't think that people realize exactly what happened with the Coverley project. And you give not only, it is not just the houses. And then we did, even though we negotiated a little token to get a little bit more, a little piece more. The entire acreage at Coverley was given away by the last administration. And to make matters worse, then you go to Coverley, forget the houses, and you see all the businesses that are there. The land was given to one man. 99-year lease. A 99-year lease. A lot of us are struggling, those of us in business, struggling to pay our rents. 99-year lease. $1,000 a year. $1,000 a year. Sorry, $100 a year. The Minister of Housing, I'm glad that he reminded me. $100 a year. 99-year lease. Now, if I had anything to do with it, I'm not blaming that individual, because if you find yourself in an environment where your negotiators are weak and you're a businessman, well, you have to do what you have to do. And if I could get a 99-year lease paying $100 a year, I will take it any day. Any day. So I'm not blaming that individual. But when you are in a position whereby, having seen what has transpired, I mean, I cried when I went to Coverley, when I went to the Ministry of Housing, and when I saw those agreements. I remember sitting down with with the chairman of National Housing Corporation, who has since been fired, right, Minister? The man was fired. The minister, with the chairman of the National Housing Corporation, who shared my views. You understand? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I cried. Because that contract told me that people like me who went to school barefoot, my children should remain barefoot. My children should only be able to go to school barefoot for the rest of their lives. And I told myself, there is no way under the sun that I would involve government in any negotiations with an individual like that. Not that I have anything against him, but he has got his share. When you talk about being, sometimes you hear somebody say that that person is covered for life. I mean, covered for life? That man was not covered for life, Mr. Speaker. That man has been covered for the life of his children, his children's children, his children's children. That man has been covered for about 500 years. 500 years. And yet we have the time to still be in bed with a gentleman like that, especially when I listen to the leader of my political party on political platforms, itemizing all the things that was given to this particular individual can't happen here. That's what was said. And you in bed with a person like that? As I said, I don't blame the gentleman. But that is, if the allegations of corruption, not that visited him, that caused him to get those contracts, correct? But then, Mr. Speaker, the public out there, not me, not the member for St. Andrew, the public out there, we're talking of condemnation. Condemnation of corruption. Condemnation of corruption is not covered in this bill. But condemnation of corruption is the same thing as corruption. And we should steer clear from these individuals, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, I don't want to be part of any government. I know how hard it is to work hard for what you have, to pay a mortgage, to have difficulty sending your child to university, and then on the completion of that, hoping that you don't come down with cancer or some major illness whereby I would have to go and run to the member for my parliamentary representative for a little loan for some health reason. I know how it is. I know how it is like that. So we have got to be very careful. Very careful. This condemnation of corruption, Mr. Speaker. So come in here now with respect to this legislation. And I mean, I must say that the Attorney General is my good friend, and he will always be my good friend. Spoke to the various negotiations that he had prior to bringing this legislation to government. But before I say that, there's just one other aspect of this matter that I question of condemnation. And the question of COVID is one that we have not experienced anything like this. There's no precedent for us with respect to how to handle certain matters, although it has always been my view that when you're dealing with the law, you leave the legal matters to the lawyers. When you're dealing with medicine, you leave the medical problems to the doctors, and you do the advising. You know, it seems as if all the tables are turned. But I think that everybody in Barbados knows the situation with respect to the problem with respect to the sourcing of vaccines in this country, and I don't think that it is a matter which should be brushed aside just like that to say that there's no issue. It is a big issue. The question of the procurement of the vaccines is a big issue. It is massive, and I don't believe that the government is to blame in any way, but I think it is a responsibility of the government to prove that they are not to blame for the fiasco that has taken place. And for us to just brush it aside, for a government to just brush it aside, that creates a certain amount of suspicion, and the question of condemnation of corruption is also a matter which one has got to deal with. And as I said, I do not want to be any part of any government that condones corruption. My background is one that doesn't support that type of thing. And though I remember as a little boy when cricket was more or less like a religion. You play cricket next door, and sometimes, you know, you might get a little break and you run home to get a little snack to go back. And when you get home, sometimes you're hoping that the old lady is not around, and she tell you, well, Kerry, assuming that my name is Kerry, you got to go water breadfruit. And you got a breadfruit tree, she has any breadfruit tree, you leave and you go, you have a breadfruit tree, but your breadfruit tree is about a mile away. But you know there's a breadfruit tree belonging to the Dugids, because the Dugids always owned almost everything next door. And you go in the Dugid tree, and you bring a breadfruit. And when you bring the breadfruit, the old lady look at you and say, you come back here very quick. You know, and then when she's ready to realize, licks in your tail. Licks in your tail. Licks in your tail, because, I mean, that is how I was brought up. So I find it extremely difficult to be part of any government that condones corruption. And Mr. Speaker, this is why, in dealing with a matter of this nature, this bill, I know the Attorney General made certain excuses with respect to the delays. COVID was also one. COVID wasn't one when I was removed from the Ministry of Housing, or no houses haven't been built since I left Ministry of Housing. But COVID is now used as an excuse for everything. You understand? I was in the Ministry of Housing, and I was even placed, I mean, there were even certain housing programs that was placed on my desk that I had to bring to cabinet that I didn't even know nothing about. I knew absolutely nothing about. And but COVID was used because we didn't, during that period, we weren't able, the funds, for some strange reason, no funds were made available to build any houses. I mean, I found it very strange because the honorable member, the present Minister of Housing, is a magician. A magician. Because the Minister of Housing immediately, the day after he took over, he didn't only get rid of my chairman and all the other people in the ministry, but he stated that he would build 500 houses in 1 year. I am still waiting for those houses in those 500 houses in 1 year, and we are now into the second year, and no houses have been built. But Mr. Speaker, this is serious legislation, and the Attorney General blamed COVID and everything else, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, because I know that when you're dealing with this type of legislation, obviously you have to have the benefit of the best advice. But the good thing about it is that during the election, we knew exactly what we were about. And when you are dealing with legislation, you have to, there's a purpose behind the legislation. If you want to target all the drug lords in Orange Hill, you frame the legislation in such a way that all of those drug lords are targeted. It has nothing to do with bringing anybody from overseas or anything like that. You understand? But this legislation, when you look at I think it's chapter 144, and there was also another prevention of corruption bill. I think that was in 2012. And when you look at this legislation and you make a comparison, I would like to say that there's very little difference, but it does not capture the type of things that we spoke about on the political platforms. Because we spoke on the political platforms to a number of issues. And it is fairly obvious that you, not only with respect to the bill, the corruption bill, but other things that we had to take into consideration. The question of campaign financing, the questions of registration of political parties, which borders on corruption. I believe that if we had legislation pertaining to registration of political parties and campaign contributions and things like that, that the former minister, although the present member for St. James South would not like to hear me say that, he would probably be still the member for St. James South. I believe so. And I strongly believe that.
The honorable member has 2 more minutes.
There. I strongly believe that he would be. And all I'm saying is that this bill, and the Attorney General did mention the type of legislation that we are trying to bring. And I would have hoped that he wouldn't mention the Republic Bill. You know, I've been in this house for a long, long time, maybe too long. And, you know, there are certain courtesies that you extend to the backbench, that you extend to the opposition, and you extend to your colleagues, you know, your fellow colleagues in cabinet. And you know that. I don't know if it is a first because of the fact that we have all the seats, including the one for Michael West, because he's still a member of the Bar Business Party. But you know that you could bring legislation, I mean serious legislation like this. I mean, and I don't know if it is, I can't blame him. I might have to blame the leader of the House. But this is legislation, you solicit comments from the Integrity Barbados, Integrity Company of Barbados, for the Bar Association. But yet when you come to the legislation, you totally ignore, apart from a few little pleasantries. I mean, and I'll tell you this, I had heard about the Integrity Group, but I could not believe it when I read. I mean, you're dealing with 75 pages of legislation, you know, in this corruption bill. And then you're dealing with recommendations from the Integrity Group. I mean, solid recommendations. 15 pages. Solid recommendations. Plus recommendations from the Bar Association. Nothing of substance. Nothing of substance in terms of those recommendations. But you laid the bill last week. And my understanding was I was a little shocked that you wanted to debate it last week. Because you debated the Republic Bill the week before. I mean, when I first heard about the Republic Bill and certain things with respect to the Republicans, I could not even believe it. I don't want to chastise the leader of the opposition, because there are certain things that the leader of the opposition could agree to that I cannot believe. Because you are making recommendations before a bill gets to Parliament. So it's like you get a thief decides to get away with something, and he decides, well, I can get away with anything else, so he comes in again with something else. So that's exactly what happened. You thief last week or week before, so you're coming back and thieving again.
I remember, you know, using some unparliamentary language.
Mr. Speaker, thief is not.
Yeah, unparliamentary language.
Thief
Your Honor, remember, and for your personal,
I withdraw.
You're a veteran, sir.
Yeah.
You're a member of Integrity, sir.
Yes. I agree with that. But thief is not. It is like the word dog, D-A-W-G. It is not.
You know, you said you didn't say D-O-G. You said D-A-W-G.
But I mean
T-I-E. So you can't, please don't draw the parallel, though.
In this case, I mean T-I-E-F. But I withdraw that.
You mean T-I-E-F?
T-I-E-F.
But don't pronounce it thief then.
Okay. Theft. But you know, you do things last week and you get away with it. So I am not concerned. I could even condone, although condone is not in my vocabulary, what has happened this week. But I fear, Mr. Speaker, and this is where you are to blame, Mr. Speaker, because you are there to protect the backbench. You are there to protect the members of the opposition. And you can't bring such an important bill and expect that it be debated almost immediately with 75 pages. 25 pages of recommendations, 28 pages of recommendations. An important bill. I mean, and this is 3 years after the election. So my objection, Mr. Speaker, is just to make sure I'm not condemning what has taken place, but saying that you've gotten away with it in one case. I just would hope that any other similar legislation like this would at least give us the opportunity, we on the backbench, and
I remember, please, Wayne.
We on the backbench would be able to at least be able to have some sort of time to peruse and debate this bill in the same way that the government, the Attorney General, the members of Cabinet would be able, having had about six months or so to deal with it. But, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding everything else, Mr. Speaker, I support, notwithstanding the fact that it falls real short. And I would urge all members to read the comments from Integrity Barbados. I would have liked in this presentation to have read them. It is a pity that the Attorney General did not have the time to go through them almost verbatim, because this is very important legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. Honourable Member, could you turn off your mic, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I joined the debate at a very interesting time because this matter of corruption, sir, as has been stated before, has significant consequences for not just the public finances, sir, but certainly in the context of a small democracy, sir, seeking to find its way in a challenging global environment, that every opportunity that we can take, sir, to raise the good governance of the country is an opportunity, sir, that I will fully support. And I listened very carefully, sir, to the presentation of the leader of the opposition. And as the member for St. James Central clearly indicated, and anybody who was listening, one would think that this government has not done what it can do administratively, sir, so far, to be able to deal with those issues that we were confronted with at day one, and we sought to be able to address. And I will go a little further into some of those details, sir, because I think it is important for us to understand that whilst we are debating the legislation here, sir, with respect to the prevention of corruption, the financial implications, sir, of corruption certainly is real. And I say to all those who either were alleged or know where the money is, sir, that right now Barbados is going through a very challenging set of circumstances, in part brought on by COVID, in part brought on by the previous mismanagement of the previous administration, sir. And those two things, sir, combined to put us in a situation where, one, and let me just remind the chamber and certainly the honourable member for the honourable leader of the opposition, that this government is still paying arrears that were left by the last government, in part, perhaps, because of the mismanagement and the corruption to which we are speaking to. But let me remind, through you, sir, the country, that since coming to office, and I listened very, very carefully, sir, to the leader of the opposition speaking about the number of contracts that were given out in the last administration and how the perception of it being going to one person, sir. Very, very strong, cogent argument, sir, that I don't think anybody in Barbados, sir, that is of reasonable mind would deny. But coming to office, sir, this government set about from an administratively perspective, sir, and I know that the leader of the opposition would not want to give necessarily credit in this particular aspect, but we engage, sir, the services of Whitehall, not just for the debt restructuring, sir, but for the renegotiation, sir, of a number of contracts that were entered into on behalf of, presumably, sir, on behalf of the people of Barbados by the previous administration. And some of those contracts were completely null and void because of this government's work to ensure that the taxpayers, sir, were not taken advantage of. And so, whilst we did not have the legislation at the time to deal with the prevention of corruption then, sir, I support this measure here, but I want to say to the people of Barbados, sir, that for the last 3.5 years, we have been dealing with some of those egregious contracts, sir, in a very serious way, to ensure that, one, the public services are not compromised, that the management of the fiscal affairs of this country, sir, are not compromised, and that we can chart a path, sir, that will not see the taxpayer taken advantage of. Now, what is clear, and I just want to say it for the benefit of the public, sir, and certainly for the benefit of the Leader of the Opposition, we have, as a government, recognized that in the procurement process, and obviously there will be an opportunity, sir, to speak to some of that going forward, that whilst we have not yet concluded the work with respect to the new legislation as it relates to procurement, that we would ensure that for critical infrastructure and projects to the government, particularly, sir, with respect to some state-owned enterprises, that we would establish, sir, a college of negotiators to ensure that the principles of good governance, sir, would apply, and that nobody will be taken advantage of with respect to the execution of these contracts. And we don't do that, sir, because we just felt like bringing people in to necessarily oversee the evaluation committees of the various organizations. Because I hear the opposition make reference to indirectly, some reference to no formal process for effectively, sir, determining procurement practices. But there is, sir, the tenders committee. Depending on the nature of any procurement, sir, there is a special tenders committee that will review it. But we feel, sir, that notwithstanding those specific aspects of the procurement, that where there are complicated procurement measures to be undertaken, that the additional support to ensure that financially, sir, that the government and the people of Barbados are not taken for a ride. And I believe, sir, that having done that, that we have been able to put together over the course of the last 3 years, sir, put together a framework that we believe, sir, that once fully ventilated and understood, sir, which I will endeavor, sir, to so do at the earliest possible opportunity, that these are the kinds of reforms, for lack of a better term, sir, that we have actually put in place to safeguard the interests of taxpayers. Now, having said that, sir, there's a saying in Barbados, sir, see what you can do for me. See what you can do for me, sir. And all of us as members of parliament hear that week in, week out, sir. See what you can do for me. And there is perhaps, sir, in certain parts of the society, acceptance, sir, that so long as you could see what you could do for me, sir, that is acceptable. And regrettably, sir, that can extend from the simple thing of helping somebody, sir, to fill an application out, sir, to give them the appropriate information in terms of where opportunities may or may not exist, sir. And that can cascade, sir, far and wide in the context of see what you could do for me. And the truth is, sir, that as part of the conversation with respect to how we move forward as a society that wants to be well governed, we all have to accept, sir, that see what you could do for me may no longer, sir, be acceptable in the context of a prevention of corruption regime. Because at the end of the day, sir, what has to be good for the goose, sir, has to be good for the gander. And it is a conversation, sir, that in every nook and cranny of this country, sir, if we want Barbados to be freer of influence, freer, sir, of corrupt practices, and to ensure that there is a level, sir, of equity with respect to the distribution of public goods and public services, that we must be committed, sir, to be able to so do. And I have every confidence, sir, that what we have been able to do, and I know that the Attorney General has indicated the other pieces of legislation that will be brought to bear to build out. Because a singular piece of legislation, sir, in of itself does not solve the problem. But the reality is, I believe that this goes a long way, sir, to helping to change the conversation about how, not just how government procurement is undertaken, but certainly, sir, the kinds of standards that we will accept, certainly within the public service, the state-owned enterprises, sir, and the private sector, sir, to ensure that we are all comfortable with the way that the country is being run. And the truth is, sir, that many a day, things happen in ministries and departments and agencies of government, sir, that none of us in here, sir, are aware of on a daily basis. And the extent to which, sir, whether you are a junior officer, whether you're a middle manager in government, sir, whether you're a senior public servant, sir, or whether you're an MP or a minister, sir, the reality is that we all must be accountable, sir, for the actions that we take every day in order to ensure that the public interest is served. And so when the Auditor General, sir, publishes his reports, and I've met with the Auditor General on several occasions, sir, to discuss with him how the Ministry of Finance is going to execute reforms to help minimize some of these challenges. And regrettably, sir, we were to establish the internal audit function of government by September. Our aim now is September of 2021. The aim now, sir, is to have that done in time for the next financial year. And the reason that we've had to make those adjustments, sir, and it make no apologies about it, sir, is because everything that we have been able to execute so far has been significantly hampered because of COVID. And however, given that we are seeing a significant uptake with respect to vaccines in the country at the moment, sir, we are now in the process of reshaping the budget, as the public can clearly see, the management of the pandemic is taking a slightly different shape, and by extension, sir, we are also reshaping the budget to be able to help continue the reforms that we were already committed to doing. But I say so, sir, very clear in my mind that even the establishment of an internal audit department will not solve the problem. Because if people are intent, sir, as the honourable member for St. Andrew so eloquently says, sir, if people are intent, sir, on thieving, sir, then I am confident that this piece of legislation, properly implemented in the agency, sir, supported, that we will catch them, sir, and they will be dealt with. But let me say, sir, on that particular score, that it is regrettable, sir, that we have had to come to this place to be able to not just pass the legislation, sir, but this process costs a lot of money, sir. These skill sets, the resources that now have to be dedicated, sir, to be looking after these things, sir, they cost money. And I'm saying to Barbadians that we have to clean up our act, sir, because I would rather, sir, be spending money helping to develop other aspects, sir, of the public policy for Barbados, rather than having to be spending money on trying to figure out, sir, who doing what, when, where, and how. And that's the reality, sir, that we've been faced with. We have to spend the money, and therefore I say to the leader of opposition, you've already seen monies in the budget, and therefore as the years go by, then you would anticipate then that as the resources are made available there, investigations take time, sir, as you well know, and with time, there's cost, and then obviously the impact with respect to the results the public will be able to see for themselves within that space. But it takes time and money. And investigation, sir, you don't just start investigating today, sir, and magically you have a case that is winnable. And you know, sir, whether a case is winnable or not. And the reality is, Barbadians can feel better tonight, sir, not just knowing that there's a piece of legislation, but I would like to think, sir, that Barbadians can feel a sense of confidence that this government, under extraordinary circumstances, are still very much committed to solving these long-standing problems. And I can say, sir, that there ain't nobody in this country, sir, that can call my name in nothing. I know that for a fact. And if they do, sir, they're telling lies. And I know some very good lawyers, sir, that I can engage, including you, sir. But I'm being very serious, sir. Barbadians can rest assured when the night comes, sir, that certainly this Ministry of Finance is not in any way aiding and abetting in any nefarious activities. Because what the member for St. James Central indicated in his presentation of actions and being undertaken without parliamentary approval, sir, and let me make it clear, sir, the consolidation of wealth, sir, is a problem in of itself, and it's a global problem, and it's something that it has to be dealt with, certainly at a global level, and certainly in Barbados, it is a problem. But consolidation of wealth, sir, and thieving, they are two completely different things. And the extent to which whatever arrangement was taking place, sir, between the then Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Housing, sir, I don't know what that is, what it was, but certainly, sir, it should not in any way be no, whatever it was, it certainly may have contributed to consolidation of wealth somewhere, and therefore it ought to be investigated fully. But as I said, sir, those are the details in terms of where money goes and to whom. That is the case now that will have to be built, sir. I can't speculate on it, but those details obviously will have to be ironed out in terms of exactly what transpired with respect to that. But, sir, this government has, in the context of even in this COVID environment, sir, we have laid contracts in this parliament. We will continue to do so, sir. And the reality of the situation is, sir, that whilst we will provide as much information, sir, as is humanly possible, I know that there are a number of people out there, sir, that still believe, sir, that somehow or the other, we in here gotta be thieving something, sir. That I've heard people address that to me directly, sir. And no matter how I try to convince them otherwise, that the information comes to the parliament, the thing is passed, people believe, sir, that somehow or the other, we in here doing something that we should not be doing. Now, I don't know how we will get over, sir, that in the same way that we have vaccine hesitancy, sir, there are people who will choose, sir, to believe something that otherwise is not necessarily the case. But all I can say to Barbadians, sir, through you, is that this bill is just but one of the anchors of the legislative framework that would allow us to be able to deal with aspects of corruption. I know there are other pieces of legislation in relation to which the AG would have indicated earlier will be important. And the truth is this, I feel that Barbadians, if you know that you have participated or witnessed corruption, you should come forward. The framework will be set up in order to so do. But the truth is, sir, everybody want to wizzy in the corner and talk about it. But when the time comes, sir, to stand up and put your hand on the Bible, sir, or the Quran, or whatever you choose to swear to, people simply are suddenly afraid of coming forward and really, sir, performing their civic duty. And this government will put all of the systems in place, sir. We will make all the resources available to be able to fight corruption. But at the end of the day, sir, it is the people who are out there every day interacting certainly with members of the public service, interacting with members of the private sector, sir. It is people who have to stand up, sir, and say that I am going to be a responsible citizen, and I will not, sir, participate in anything that damages not just the reputation of Barbados, but certainly, sir, damages the goodwill that we believe, sir, the public wants us to be able to demonstrate. The truth is, sir, this will continue to be a priority for the government, as is everything else a priority for government. And I certainly wish, sir, that we had these powers vested at the beginning. because by now, sir, we would have been able to have made some headway with respect to this. And I know that Barbadians are frustrated, sir, perhaps with the process, and I know that I hope that Barbadians take the opportunities, sir, and I say it now, I hope that Barbados will take the opportunity, sir, in looking at the new constitution to deal with some of the issues with the judicial system, sir, because as you know, sir, justice denied justice delayed, sir, is justice denied. And there too much of this, sir, the anxiety that people are feeling about corruption deals with not just the length of time it takes to investigate, which I accept, sir, is frustrating, but equally when a case actually reaches the threshold where it can go to court, it is now how long does it take for people to feel that justice. And I know that with the trial for the former member of St. James South, a lot of people were watching not just the efficiency, for lack of a better term, sir. I don't know if that's used in a legal sense, the efficiency, but people were seemingly impressed with the short space of time within which the case was brought and heard. Of course, sir, we all know a lot would have gone on in the background, which I have no idea what may have occurred. But I am saying to Barbadians that this now gives us a framework to be able to do some of that, and I hope that with some of the reform, sir, which I'm sure you too, sir, will be happy to lead, is to ensure then that once a credible case is brought for anybody, that it can get through the court system in a reasonable time so that people can see and feel that justice, whatever justice is to be meted out, that the justice, sir, is served. So I support this bill, sir. It is a step in the right direction. I can give the assurance to Barbadians that the Ministry of Finance and the government has been working to not just address the issues with some of the contractual arrangements that the leader of the opposition raised, because I felt it was important, sir, that once he spoke as he did, that I remind the country that those contracts were addressed administratively by us, one by one, and therefore, whilst listening to him, sir, a specific impression will be conveyed, but I give the country assurance that we have gone through the process and we continue to press and make sure that where things need to be tidied up, that they're tidied up. And here's the reality, sir. All of this it takes time, sir, to do these things when the government really should be focused on doing other things. And it begs the question, sir. It begs the question. I'm being very, very, very serious, sir. This government has been doing a lot of cleaning up. And this cleanup process, sir, as you know, sir, I had a very quick conversation with the clerk at lunchtime, and he indicated to me, sir, that the work at the Parliament is progressing nicely. That obviously the more you touch, the more you realize that there are things, the wadants and the termites, sir, got the whole place eat up, and therefore would require some more resources to be able to resolve. So all I'm saying to Barbadians, sir, is that the more that you dig into these issues, obviously you start to unearth different things, and therefore we want to make sure that we can follow the threads wherever they lead, and wherever they lead, sir, then we must come to whatever conclusion that we need to come to with that respect. But it takes time, it takes resources, and this government, sir, is fully committed to allowing this process to go through. And I ask Barbadians that whilst this may seem to be long in coming, the reality is that this journey has been interrupted significantly with what we had to deal with, and all I ask, sir, is to give this the opportunity, sir, to start to see some progress, so that any discussion, sir, with respect to corruption and how we're addressing it, I think certainly is sincere from our perspective. We will put the resources as required to be able to address it, and let the process be independently done, such that people can feel a sense of confidence again that the country is being run well. But from a financial perspective, sir, we have no difficulty with this. I'll end on just one comment, sir. When we passed the Public Finance Management Act, sir, in 2019, and we put some specific provisions in there, sir, that requires now, sir, state-owned enterprises not just to report and to give account for their mandate, but certainly, sir, we made provisions for all boards to receive corporate governance training. And I'm happy to report that the Ministry of Finance, sir, has designated the Ministry of Labor, who is designated the Ministry of Labor to do the training, and they have engaged the services of a company to be able to provide that training for all board members across the spectrum. And I believe you're awaiting a proposal for what we will do with these school boards with respect to broadening that, such that, again, it's nothing that is happening up front, but these are the things that are being done to ensure that we improve the governance structure of whether it is the largest SOE or the smallest school board in the country. And we hope that with this type of adoption, that we will be able to, not just people wanting to serve, but that people will want to serve understanding and be given the appropriate framework within which, sir, they have to serve. But equally, sir, state-owned enterprises now are required every 2 years to be able to report to the public through an annual meeting. And they know that obviously COVID has given that we're in the second year now, the intent obviously would have been to have those meetings in person. I know that the QEH has done theirs virtually. I speak subject to correction. I don't want to mislead Parliament, but I believe the BWA has had one. But you will notice that over the coming year, sir, that more and more of these entities will be coming to the public in some form or fashion, sir, to be able to articulate what their mandate happens to be and what it is that they will be providing to the public. And that too, sir, is just an additional measure of accountability that the public, sir, will be given the opportunity to be able to engage. So rather than just call brass tacks, sir, and complain, or whatever the show is on CBC, sir, to complain, I say it through you, sir, to the public, that when these state-owned enterprises go to have their public meetings, that you engage the authorities themselves, the state-owned enterprises, such that there is actually a mechanism for direct follow-up. And I know that people listen to brass tacks and the calling programs and respond, but we want to ensure that there's a structured way within which the public can engage with state-owned enterprises, and we believe that this will be critical as part of the civic responsibility of citizens. And so in our quiet way, sir, we have been working not just to sensitize, certainly the person who serve or who may be recommended to serve on the boards of any of the state-owned enterprises, but equally, sir, we want to make sure that the public gets the opportunity to engage directly with these directors as well as senior managers of those institutions, even though it's only once every 2 years as the requirement. But I hope that as we move forward, sir, that the state-owned enterprises will see it as a matter of normalcy, if you like, sir, to actively engage the public in a very serious way, because I do know that from time to time, depending on what is happening, depending on the project, they will. But the reality is, sir, I want persons to take confidence that we have put systems in place to alert anybody who wants to serve on a board that they must be trained and given training within the context of corporate governance. We provided the resources to the Ministry of Labor, having been designated to carry that out. And that too, sir, will help us to raise the accountability with respect to whether it's procurement or any of the other issues related to the management of our state-owned enterprises. And ultimately, sir, what this will lead to, not just with the reforms that we're doing internally to the Ministry of Finance and by extent the rest of government, the establishment of the internal audit department as well, I believe will help us over the long term to be able to focus the managers, the middle managers, sir, the senior executives of state-owned enterprises, but equally, sir, the board of directors, that we will be able to lift the standards of corporate governance from top to bottom, and therefore with those things we believe that we'll be able to improve the system. The Leader of the Opposition spoke to the requirement for Contractor General, sir, and I will speak to that more fulsomely at a later date. But the reality of where we are, sir, is that there are steps to be taken by everybody, sir. There's only so much resources available and time to do anything, and therefore, notwithstanding the COVID situation is demanding a lot of our time, sir. What people may perceive, sir, as the speed of government is just a pivot and transition, sir. Now that we have been able to achieve a level of vaccination that we can now start to think differently, sir. What the public will now see, not just legislatively, but a range of other issues, is evidence of that pivot now, just, sir, to move away from just the single issue of COVID, but start to ensure that, sir, that not that the government ever lost its focus, but what the people will see now is that what we come to the Parliament to do, sir, there will be an acceleration of things that have been worked on, but COVID obviously would have impacted the delivery of the timeline. And therefore, with those few words, sir, I fully support this bill. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to add to the contribution for this bill and to lend my support from the inception. We always learned, sir, that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And having learned of the history and what the then Cox Commission would have indicated since 1929, and we know for how long this aspect of corruption creeping into the society and how the legislation should be framed to be able to abort such practices taking place in our society, we know the journey that it has taken. So I believe, sir, that the time spent on the preparation of this bill and the kind of dialogue and communication and contributions from others was worth the while to be able to stamp the whole notion of corruption and wrongdoing out of the system. And I must say, sir, that having come to public life, I wasn't so young when I entered the political arena, but my philosophy has always been to do the right thing always, to be honest and upright. And you will know, sir, that women have had a rough time in politics, not only in Barbados, but in the rest of the world. And they give you partners that you never heard about, some of them never lived yet. And they talk about all kinds of things to be able to develop negativities with your name. But that did not daunt my spirit, because I felt that as an ordinary working class woman, that I would be able to make a contribution to the development of my country and to be as honest and upright as my parents now, who would have been rolling over in their graves more than 20 years ago, one going 8 weeks after the other, if they have ever heard my name or the name of any of the children that they would have raised in any way negative, I am sure, sir, that they will roll over in their graves. I believe that as a proud people, where Barbadians worked hard, toiling in the sugar industry and the other aspects of the soil, coming through from slavery, that the people of Barbados generally, for all the generations that we know, would have worked honestly to be able to achieve what they were able to acquire. There was stark poverty, Mr. Speaker, in this country, and you know it all. And most of the historians here among us and across the island and the world for that matter, because we have so many thousands of people in the diaspora, could speak of the poverty that there came through, but the moral values that they were taught, not only at home, but in the schools and the other religious institutions, helped to put them to a level that despite whatever was negative that attracted their attention, that they were able to stave it off, knowing I have got to have self-respect. I have got to make my parents proud. If they ever hear my name being called in anything negative, they will want to destroy me. And we know what transpired in those days, Mr. Speaker. You're too young to know. But we got some good licks for even stealing an apple off somebody's tree because we didn't ask. As simple as it appeared, it was a very serious act. And so, having come through the system and acknowledging that it is so unfortunate that because of a few, perhaps, politicians who appear to be tainted or were tainted, every individual in this country who seeks to come to the political forum to be able to offer a valuable contribution is pushed in some area of negativity. Come to get rich, come to thief, come to rob people, come to get largesse, all kinds of negative things that amaze me in my old age. And so I would have come a lot of criticisms too, and I had some of the highest people in the country, as they would have said, to be my partners. Some of them that I couldn't even spell their names, furthermore. But that is how this society is. We tear down, especially if you have come from an impoverished environment. Everybody finds something negative to say. Thankfully, my personality and the personality of many of these women in here as well has been so strong that despite what anybody says, we have gone into this political arena not to promote ourselves, to get rich or to die trying, but to represent the interests of Barbadians. And that is why we make the tremendous contributions, and not only contributions, but we make a lot of sacrifices to be able to meet the needs of Barbadians in a way that is different from what I have seen in a very, very long time with this current administration, Mr. Speaker. And so I want to reiterate to the public of Barbados that honesty and uprightness is all that I am interested in, and I believe that is what is the same for all of my colleagues here in this distinguished chamber, sir. So I abhor corruption, wrongdoing in any form or fashion or at any level in this society. I practice what I preach. I am not a pastor, a priest, a bishop, anybody at that level, but I know that the simple tenets and the guidelines from the book, the Holy Book, has helped to pilot me through this particular, I would call it, career, making sure that I do not forget from whence I have come, and that I do not breach what my parents and teachers and friends and guardians and others mentors would have wanted me to do in the interest of serving the people of Barbados. And I'm proud to be a member of this great Barbados Labour Party since 1971, so you know, sir, how young I am. And I supported whatever was given in the Covenant of Hope. The Honourable Opposition Leader would have signed it too, because I believe that that is what he stood for and still stands for. But sometimes when you're in opposition, you talk for opposition talk. And I believe that all the honourable members here would have been a part and will continue to be an integral part of what we have pledged to the people of Barbados. And this is one of the pledges, because we have lived in a time where we have seen corruption not only in Barbados, but we witness what's happening in so many other parts of the world every day. Even some members of parliament have to be brought to justice for receiving bribes and to doing all these negative things that we know are wrong. And I encourage all my young colleagues in here who are here for the first time or whatever period, let us continue to uphold those good standards that our politicians of the past, our leaders of the past, our parents and guardians collectively upheld in the church, in the school, in the community, because we are mentors and the eyes of the people of Barbados. And the people of the rest of the world are upon us, because the internet takes everything across the entire hemisphere. So I shall continue, Mr. Speaker, to condemn any form of corruption, whether it is by the poor or the rich, the old or the young. And I have a good connection with the constabulary And I will whisper to them what I see and what I know that is wrong, because it would be my conscience that will kill me if I know of it and not say anything with persons whom I consider to be confidential and who will want to push towards making that process be stymied in the exercise. So I would rather die, Mr. Speaker, with my dignity than have to be involved in anything that is connected with the word corrupt. I would want to go with my dignity, and therefore I stave myself away. I run campaigns. I beg no one for anything. I have Christmas hampers and other activities I pull from my pocket because I'm in a better position now than when I was in the classroom, and I would not have been able to purchase. And if I can't buy, I say I can't buy, but I do things incrementally, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you, sir, a man of character, will do the same. Although the salary of a lawyer may not be the same, sir, or an attorney at law might not have been the same as one as a teacher, and even in this distinguished position that I am in. So, sir, and therefore, I know that you're a man of integrity, and I expect you to continue despite whatever is put before you to do something that is illegal, because you too would have come from humble origins, and you know that you have to protect your own integrity and that. So I believe in integrity, morality, fair play, transparency, and upholding of standards that must be continued and promoted across the entire of this country. So I endorse and strongly endorse this Prevention of Corruption Bill 2021. The government's tenure, sir, has been short, and it has been a very complex experience over the past 3 years. There's no other government that I'm aware of that has been faced with the challenges that this government has been faced when it came to having to go to the IMF, because the last administration left everything in disarray. University students could not pay to go there. The money was withdrawn. All kinds of things happened that I will not spend time now on that, because already that is known. But I know that the ashfall took a toll on us. I know that COVID is still taking a toll on us. And I mean, I complain about the roads in St. Thomas. I complain about the wells that need cleaning. I complain about other projects, but then when I look back in reality, although I can apologize to the people of the parish and the constituency, because they know me and they know what I am worth and what this Labour Party is worth. And I know that the money that would have been gone to help with so many other projects now has to be spent in COVID, to be able to save lives and families, and to bring this country to a level where tourism can be rekindled again. People can go back out to work. People can have their houses fixed as a result of Tropical Storm Elsa and the freak storm we had the week before that. People can go about their lives in a different way again as they would have been before. So I know that this government faced it, and we faced it, and we are fixing it, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we have a leader who understands. And we have a team in this Labour Party that forms this government who work together in unity to be able to make that difference. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate my support for this bill, and that the approach to sensitize the public of Barbados about it. People called for it. They saw things happening. They heard things. All of them were not true, but they said, we need to come with this prevention of corruption bill, because we want the proof to show that our leaders have clean characters and that they look after our interests and that they don't push, because people believe that you can just go push your hand in the treasury and take out money and spend it for yourself. And I call on this government as well, Mr. Speaker, publicly, to let us get out there and speak to the public so they can understand the role of a member of parliament, the role of a minister, the things we do and cannot do. We cannot handle any money. It is the permanent secretary, Mr. Speaker, who helps us as we try to work with the policies and so on that we have established to be able to determine whether the budget can carry it or not, how it will be spent, what the accountability will be like, those agencies that receive, what they will have to give in, those persons who get contracts. That is not our role as members of parliament. We work with it and we give approval because we understand when that cabinet paper comes, it goes to cabinet, it is well discussed, everything ventilated, and then we determine that this is the right route to go. This team of persons or groups of individuals or entities will benefit from what we are doing. And I believe that we must continue to do that. I do not know, Mr. Speaker, sir, if that continued in the last administration, because there were so many problems, and out of that so many people became so disenchanted and felt that they were just going out casting their vote, and people are not doing what they should do in their own interest. And I do not want to be engaged in anything that is contrary to the manifesto pledges, because we believe that the pledges that we give to the people, as long as we can fulfill them and account for the expenditure and everything else that we do, I believe that we are on the correct path. And I've seen governments who've done it before and done it exceptionally well. So we will work on the projects, we will deliver, we will document, we will share the information so the public of Barbados wins back that confidence that they would have had that their last administration caused a lot of people to become so disenchanted that they really were glad to see them go. We must not ever, ever make any mistake with what must happen, but we must educate the people along with us to be able to let them know these are the things that a minister can do. These are the things that a member of parliament can do. These are the things that we are not to do, but the public is not clear on that. And it is my duty and the duties of all these honorable members and even the aspirants that will come in the political arena to be able to do that so people understand a politician can't rich. So I bought a vehicle second-hand and through the credit union. But people say, oh, she buy that big truck there. See how them is going public and them as they're going to job, they could take the money, government money, and buy a big truck. Mr. Speaker, sir, they will say the same thing about you. They will say the same thing from my colleague here from Christchurch East. They will say the same thing from my colleagues from St. Michael, Humphrey. South. That is the kind of mentality that will develop because people are judging us by the actions of the last administration, and it is wrong. And so today, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must do the sensitizations and let people aware, make people aware of what to expect, and also to let them know about the laws of Barbados and how the laws of Barbados will work for them. Now, the historical cultural practice of our native land, sir, have always been to work hard, honestly, diligently, in order to achieve. So our foreparents, they will rent the little spot that belonged to the plantation, and if they were able to get it for the 10 cents per square foot, thank the Barbados Labour Party for the tenantries for whole purchase act, and in the early 1980s, and empowering poor people to build. And those poor people will build from the back and come forward. They didn't take a cent from anybody. They threw a meeting turn. They did what they had to do to be able to build, to put a proper cover over the heads of their children and their family. But over the years, approaches have changed, especially with the cultural penetration. We see what is happening in the outside world, and sometimes we want to try it too. So we hear of the bribery that's going on in another country. We hear of the big drug deals. We see the people on the movies and in real life. And the big gold teeth and the big gold chains and the big fussy cars. Some of them have never done a day's work, Mr. Speaker, in anybody's place. They don't have any own business of their own, but the kickbacks. And the other aspects of raising money that is not theirs, honestly. And we have now got our young people in my mother used to call it a tizzy, in a conundrum, if that would fit there, where they feel, I just got to go and run that little task there for the guy down the road, and I can get a $2,000. The fella tell me if I come and I buy some firearms and I rent them out for $1,000 a day, I can make some big money. All of that is wrongdoing. All of that is corruption. Now, who is suffering? The poor people, the rich people, the same individuals and their families. And therefore, we have to do a lot more teaching, a lot more talking with, so that people understand it is not that you go to parliament or you're high and mighty, because we have to go back out there to the people again. But in the meantime, we have to educate them what you are practicing is wrong. what you are doing is not in keeping with the laws or those tenets that are so well enshrined in the Bible, that you have to work and by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. All of that. And we have lost a lot of those proverbs. Watch whose wings you fly. You watch the fellow out there that flying here, because you don't know whose wings he's flying with. All of that the seniors taught us, and we have thrown our culture through the window to mine all kind of madness from some other world, international countries, some other countries in the international world where those people do not have the morals that we have, because they were not steeped in the cultural norms and values that have brought us thus far. For ordinary poor black people to be managing this honorable chamber, sir, when we know that before they were all the people, the white people and others from London or England or the British people who did it. Now we are here. We have to make sure that we reinforce those values so that Barbadians understand we can do this and it is right. If you do that, it is wrong. But we cannot give a blind eye. And the blind eye is what is causing a lot of people to continue to do what they're doing, because I don't want to say anything to him. I want you to vote for me. Vote for me or not, I shall tell you, you are doing madness, foolishness, ignorance, whatever. Come here, young man, I just saw you smoking a smoke. Do you know that is illegal? And those are the things we need to say and then say, come back. I still love you though, you know. But you're doing wrong. And if the police picks you up, your parents ain't even got the money to give you bail. And so those are the things that we need to do so that they understand what you're doing is wrong, it is corrupt or so, or what you're doing is right. And we need, as leaders at this level, in the various faith-based institutions, in our schools, and whatever the area of management is, to transfer those skills to our youth and help to lift them up, that they can understand that the prevention of corruption bill makes sense and will help to guide them and their generations to come to be able to live quiet, peaceful, productive lives, safe lives as well as the times go on. Now, Barbadians are still very concerned, Mr. Speaker, over the changes that have taken place. I spoke about the cultural penetration and illegal practices across the hemisphere. So we learn, drug deal, kick back. I can get the contract for you, but put in a $2,000 for me. Well, that is small. I know a member for St. Philip West. I know that it might sound small because I'm not on the road in the same way perhaps as men are. But I hear the whispers and so on, and it really bothers me. There are bribes. There's thievery in our banks in Barbados as well, Mr. Speaker. And I have butt up on some because I'm working with the seniors. And I do not behave as though I'm a civil servant, but I go out there and I canvass. And people call me and they complain from every step and every area in Barbados, sir, including yours and every other else in here, including St. Michael West. They call and say, the old lady, somebody went to the bank, took her check. That is thievery. That is robbery. And unconscionable of those persons who are doing it. We know of persons working in the banks and taking out money from people's accounts that are dormant. And we have a lot of cases in the court right now, sir, where people are waiting. And I want every last one of them if found guilty to go and spend some time and come back and cut down some of the bush and the trees and so, like the prisoners used to do in the past. Because they have some privileges that are different from anything I've ever known, and our country is going down and the taxpayers are reeling under the pressure because we're feeding them. I'm not telling you any 3 square meals because I'm not interested in that because they have to live. But we need to make sure that we stamp out those taking off people money from accounts, duping the seniors. And these seniors are being robbed not only by families and friends, Mr. Speaker, but some of them are being robbed by lawyers, some of them by doctors, some of them by bishops and priests and pastors, some of them by strangers who go to work with them. Those are things that need to be pursued, and that is why I'm glad that there's a special section, a special unit in the police force that is pursuing those kinds of matters, because those old people, those seniors, have toiled day and night in the sun, in the rain, in the fields, in Bridgetown shopping, selling, vending, And the old people need that care and guidance and protection. And this is a fact, Mr. Speaker, of which I speak, because I have the information that I will share it when I have to, and I do. Barbadians are extremely concerned about what is going on. And the technology does not make it any easier, Mr. Speaker, because ever so often I get people who send me to ask me these questions, and people tell me if you press that number one, your account goes. The person draws every cent out of it. Or they send to tell you you win $1 million. And you cannot come here win $1 million, but you have to send your account number, every cent drawn out. Foolish Bajans are getting duped like that too. I am sorry to say, you know why? Because they're gullible. By the sweat of thy brow shall thou eat bread. And that is what I believe. Unless somebody bequeaths something to you, then you can access it, or you can work hard to raise the money to get it. And that is going on in a way, sir, that is not good at all. In the past, corruption used to be subtle. People did these little things, little doopsie-doodle things, and it was subtle. And sometimes people gave a blind eye. They will whisper it, but not want to go anywhere to say. And this is true now, because people are afraid that if I say that I saw this person in this negative activity, what they acquired, then they're fearful that the body will come back and that there will be repercussions. So we can understand that as well. But currently, the actions are so visible and the practices are so much in your face at higher levels as well, both in the public and the private sector. And it should be stamped out, because there's no way, absolutely no way, that houses should have been built through the Poverty Alleviation Project. 6 houses, I understand, and you can't even see shaving from the 6 houses. All kinds of monies were thrown into the constituency councils. No results. Summer camps, no results. And we could go on and on and on. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? We saw some people with some big fussy cars, some big bungalows that we knew, and they had no mortgage. They had no mortgage. The evidence is there. And I believe that in cases of that nature, that is why people point at all of us and put us in this one big pot to say, all them politicians is thieves. And we don't even seem to want to defend ourselves, to let people know we came to public life with our character intact. And we are going to leave with our character intact, because we're going to follow the straight and narrow to make sure that Barbadians understand you can come to serve, but you don't have to dip your hand into the kitty to take out anything. It is the taxpayers' money that will be taken away, and therefore projects that we would like to do to help those who are most vulnerable, the disabled, the aged, those living with HIV, those are in the other categories, those whose houses have been destroyed. We want to be able to see them get back on their feet. So we do not have that authority, and I do not encourage or support anybody who seeks to want to be taking any bribes or to bring any such behavior to me. I have only had it once, Mr. Speaker, and I condemned it. If you can help me get so-and-so, mistress, I will give you $5,000. Well, I nearly went mad, Mr. Speaker, and I half mad already, you know. Because for somebody to come and tell me about $5,000 to assist them in getting something in some ministry and getting the approval, Mr. Speaker, they chose the wrong girl. And I believe that my colleagues here will hold that straight and narrow as well and condemn that behavior. And if it is a real serious bribe, call the police and give a report, because we will not stand for that kind of negative behavior. Because for me, that is corruption. And that is what will cause them to go and tell somebody, go to the girl up the road, up the little vault road. She will take it and she will help you, and the little money will help her to do something for her constituents. My constituents will be able to benefit, but I'm going to use the money I've worked for all my life to be able to make sure that they are comfortable in whatever way that I possibly can. If people give donations of food and so, that's fine. I want no money from no one to run any campaign or anything. That is not my way of doing it. It has to be a close family friend who said, no, you're poor, give me a little something, and it goes into the campaign, not to me. And I fall within the range of what political campaign requests whenever we are to go up to file what our expenditure and so on has been, because I believe in following the law and making sure that I follow the standards. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that the saying to get rich overnight is really, really true when we see the kind of things and the inducements and so that people receive. But I want at the same time to indicate and to lend my support to the Honorable Member for St. Joseph and the team with the consultation that had taken place and the kind of robust discussion, the kind of recommendations that came through for the entities, where there were individuals, there were groups, there were lawyers and others who sent in their recommendations. And I want to publicly thank them because I would have been a part of the committee at that time, and the kind of representation that they gave, I believe that it shows Barbadians want to see us go on the straight and narrow path, as we always did as a proud set of Barbadians who always upheld the laws. And so I want to publicly commend them and for the input and the recommendations that they have put towards this bill that we are discussing here today. We know, sir, that in any democracy, freedom of expression and thought, as well as all other aspects of what people believe in, we need to show respect for them in that particular area. The bill did not attract the support of 2/3 majority in the other place, sir, and we understand. But yes, and so we can manage there, but we cannot tell if an honorable member from the other place falls ill, has a parent who is ill and couldn't come that day, or whatever. It did not pass. But I believe that from the tweeting or whatever of what transpired, that we will be able, having taken the information there, that I pray that those members will, because we need this legislation to be able to tackle some of those aspects of corruption that we are seeing unfolding in the country. It is not one set of laws for the Medes and another set of laws for the Persians. It is the laws for every Barbadian. So I commend those who have given us that kind of assistance, and I pray that their actions will now make a difference whenever this legislation, sir, goes over to the other place, so that we can develop those practices for those allegations, those comments that people talk about tainted politicians and how try to destroy the character. I hope that we can be able to treat to that and deal with those persons who are the perpetrators in respect of what we are discussing. I also want, Mr. Speaker, sir, to refer to some with the ICBL saga that has put Barbados in such a negative position. MPs driving cars that they got as gifts, as was talked about in the last administration. Persons receiving contracts that couldn't even put a nail, they're contractors, but they couldn't put a nail in a piece of wood. They didn't understand how to measure anything, but they got these big contracts, and many of them. Attorneys at law that rob poor people. One or two may be in prison awaiting their out on bail. And when it comes to a person at that level, what message are we sending to the young people? Because you know the law as an attorney at law. We know of an attorney at law who was accused, and I have the document too, and Mr. Speaker, you too might have. An old man in a wheelchair being robbed. That is not what Barbadians stand for, especially people who are disabled. You don't want to take advantage of a disabled person or a differently abled person. All of those are things that we want erased from our history. And let us see how we can embrace, how we can uplift, how we can do all the things we know are necessary to show that we are above board and that integrity is the hallmark of everything that we do in this country. It happened for us before in the times of poverty. It can happen for us again. But we all need to speak up and speak out, and sometimes discreetly, because we don't want the repercussions, as I said earlier. I can talk about the Barbados Water Authority, where hundreds of thousands of dollars were paid out, and the Auditor General's report spoke to that, for persons who said they were ordered pirates from Miami. Money paid up front, not a washer, not a joint, not a length of pipe. Nothing has come to the Barbados Water Authority before this institution called the Barbados Labour Party as a government. Where are those persons? Were they brought to justice? All kinds of confusion in the transport board, selling gas at the Roebuck Street location at that time. $40,000 missing. Where is it now? Nobody knows. Nobody can give an account of it. We must be accountable for our actions wherever we are and wherever we go. And so I'm going to come to a conclusion, sir, by indicating that a lot of these actions create that doubt in every one of us and the systems, private and public, that we have in Barbados, and it casts that negative light where people continue to condemn us, saying it's the politician that gives them the guidance. It's the politician friend. You can have a friend, you can tell your friend doesn't have to have it, but if you're my friend, and I speak to you about something that is wrongdoing, or some wrongdoing that you have committed, and you choose not to do it, well, then you are no longer my friend. Because my friend was my mother and my father, and I can do it for them, because they're long dead. What about you, a friend? Because when finished, the two of us are linked together, so once you do something wrong, you're not a sainty friend. And my name is going to get pulled into the scandal. And then everybody's going to be looking at me in a different light, when in our poor, humble me only stand for what is correct and proper.
Do you want to remember has 2 more minutes?
Yes, sir. I'm going to conclude. As I said before, I came to life from humble origins, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I intend to serve the people of Barbados, not only St. Thomas. I intend to serve them. And when I leave this institution, sir, whether it be retirement or death, I expect my name. And I expect the names of my colleagues here, and I know most of them very well, to leave with their names and their integrity intact. And of course, the outstanding contribution that they have already started to make in this country, I want them to continue to build on it. And I'm talking about like an old auntie, sir. I want them to build on that contribution, so when they're long gone, and it's the same way that we're talking about the Cox Commission, I believe that would have been Semencia, or whichever Cox it would have been, or whichever of our pioneers in Barbados now, and not just in the Labour Party, but the contribution of all of those. I believe that in the same way that they have left and gone to the great beyond, or in their retirement with their character or their reputation intact, all of us can do that, because at the end of the day, we are seen as the leaders. We are seen as the persons whom everybody looks up to for guidance, for support, for everything else. And we have to live making sure that our integrity is intact. And so, the Barbados Labour Party stands for fairness, transparency, accountability, equity, and everything else. And we want to be able to have this continue to reflect across the length and breadth of Barbados. We want to see the negative elements dealt with through the legal system, to make sure that there are examples that others will see. If you do it wrong, you are going to be punished. I don't care whose child you are, whose relative you are. We don't care where you live, in the heights, the terraces, in the gullies, in the villages. We don't care, because it will be the fairness that Barbadians have grown accustomed to, that they will be able to see it continued, and the fairness in the legal system being permeated across the length and breadth of Barbados. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you, and I highly commend the Honourable Member for St. Joseph and the team with him in the legislative department where they are working, and of course all others who would have given their contributions and recommendations. I want to highly commend him for the excellent work, and I support the Prevention of Corruption Bill 2021, and I trust that this government will continue to fulfill the pledges that it has made to the people of Barbados. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to lend my support to this anti-corruption bill. But before I get to that, I want to sincerely thank the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, who has succeeded in inspiring me today. It's interesting that she came into politics in 1971, at which time I was entering the world, and I hope I can make my mark as much as she has. Most of the contributions, if not all of the contributions here this morning and this afternoon have been interesting, food for thought, all of them, I must add. But I, as a newbie, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael West suggested, many of us are newbies in here, I too want to make my small contribution in that light, I would not be able to speak as fluently on the numbers and millions of dollars that went missing as the honorable member for St. Michael West did, or I might not be able to put my case as the honorable member for St. James Central did, but I will try to do my best. I am heartened by the fact that the honorable member for St. Andrew is now walking in my shoes as a backbencher. Sometimes you have to walk the walk to understand what backbenchers here go through, and I wish I had a little more time to have a look at the legislation, but I support it and I will have that time to do so. But as I begin, I had been shaking in my, blue-colored West shoes for a little while now, worried about the fact that again I have to face the electorate for a second time, more importantly the member for St. Michael Northwest, and perhaps to some extent the member for St. Philip West, who is to my left right now. We three have been at the center, more or less, of the corruption in public life and the integrity legislation in terms of what we would have fought for during the campaign of call it 2 years before that, 2018. We have suffered the brunt. Our constituents have been made to suffer as a result. And
I don't remember you sure of that?
I am sure. I didn't tell you up till when?
No, because I didn't hear you call St. Michael Central.
I apologize.
Well,
I apologize for speaking with St. Michael. I was just pointing out the ones that,
you just randomly said 3.
Not random at all, Mr. Speaker.
You said with purpose 3. But there's St. Michael Central. There's also a Christchurch South.
But there are too many to mention, Mr. Speaker.
No, but you mentioned 3, so I was wondering if you randomly picked out 3 and left the remainder.
Okay, let me explain myself. You know how obituaries, when you don't mention somebody's name, the sum up is too many to mention? I will use that excuse here this evening. So there are too many to mention, but too numerous to mention. Thank you, honorable member. Well, I do include you. So my worry is having to face the electorate after getting on platform after platform, speaking about and I would use your terms, the alleged corruption that enveloped our constituencies, all of us. But this bit of legislation makes me feel a little bit better. I think we can go forward now into the next election constitutionally during 2023, feeling a little safer in defending our stance on corruption and the other bill, corruption and integrity legislation that we are soon to bring back to the House. So as a MP, I had to deal with certain things. We have the most notable in my mind, or one of the most notable is, for instance, the housing. The housing in Carpenter's Glade, which is in parish land, that the honorable member for Christchurch West is helping me with. Up to this week, I had videos and photographs of one of the houses in there where water is literally coming through the walls and the plugs. And yes, the warranty has been out, but these are things that we met as we came into the elections. We really can't leave these people out to suffer. But water is coming through all the plugs, the siding, the wall, which is wood. The steps have moved away from the buildings. The tiles have blown. These are issues I have to deal with daily because the people, quite rightly, the residents of the area are getting angry at it. So this is part of it. So while my opponent, who says he's waiting to be called to the seat, waits to be called, these are things that I'm already having to deal with. I have to answer or defend. I can't defend it. He has to defend the millions that the honorable leader of the opposition mentioned that went into Valerie and the Grotto, and then the houses that the honorable member for St. Thomas mentioned that eight, she says 6, but I think it's 8 of them that cannot be found, although people were paid, contractors were paid for them. I have to deal with things like that. The honorable member for Christchurch East Central used the phrase, what's it he said? See what you could do for me? He took that really literally. Many of them took that really literally, but they turned it around into see what the constituent could do for them. And we as a party are now seeking to turn that phrase around in the hopes to help our constituents. It could not be a matter of see what you could do for me. As I mentioned very early at entering this house, the women of our constituencies had to, some of them literally get on their knees to get what they want. What they wanted, when they first got in the house, a lady called me, worried that she was being evicted from a national housing unit. And when he investigated, she had owed $11,000 in rent. I asked her about this. She said, but the Honorable, she mentioned 2 MPs that gave her the house, so she never thought once that she would have to pay the rent. These are things that we have to deal with every day in the constituency. Women can now breathe a little easier. They know that when one of us is able to help them, it does not come with strings attached or anything attached for that matter, that we sincerely want to do our part. I have to deal with things like, somebody brought it up earlier today with ZR permits that were given out. And then people that really are well-deserving were unable to get more ZR permits at the time when they came in because the numbers, the allocations were already made. People that are not working, that have children, that are ready and willing to work were put on the back burner because of the previous member for St. Philip North, at least under his guidance or administration. We have to deal with things like drugs and firearms entering the country. It can't always be that what we consider the small man is made to pay for it. They have to come from somewhere. Some of these small men don't even have passports. Some can't read and write. It has to come from somewhere, and it's about time we did do the requisite investigations to get the people. And of course, there's a fear. There's a fear for your families, and there's a fear for somebody shoot up your house, and there's a fear that somebody thief your dog. And ain't no thief, I forgot. Steals your dog. Although we're now in the Republic and should be throwing off the Queen's English, I will still be right on it. Somebody steals your dog. We have the fear. People have the fear about whistleblowing. That is the truth. Despite that, we have to be able to offer protection to the ones that are the whistleblowers. I'm not sure how this will be done in such a small jurisdiction as ours, but we need to secure those people who are willing to speak. Too many times we see people being held of whichever color you have the skin, and the one with the lighter color seems always to come out the better for it. Well, the ones that look like us, most of us in here, if not all of us right now, get the end of the stick that is not so favorable and sit in prison waiting to be tried. Something seems a little curious about situations like that. So, as the Honorable Member St. Thomas said, she covered most of my speech, so she kind of stole my thunder. But as she said, it's not only politicians. People perceive that it's only the politician that is involved in this corruption business. It really is not only the politicians. And I will start first by saying I can't always defend my profession. Doctors are involved in it. I have met patients up to within the last year that have been on lists for knee and hip replacements. And with a sentence like, if you pay me how much $1,000 it is, I can do it for you next week, in the very hospital, that's a sure sign of corruption. So it says, also in my profession, you know, Mr. Speaker, it's definitely in yours, and maybe we have evidence of that. A lot of them are now coming up to keep me company in St. Philip North. I would like to say welcome them, but these kind of things need to stop. It's obviously in government institutions. We have people applying for jobs, well qualified up to the hill, and somebody who has less or no qualifications come and sit in the job that they by right should have. And I think this is, and I'm not necessarily speaking about this administration, but this is over time, where for political reasons or whatever, who you know and who your father is and your mother and da-da-da, where people end up in round holes who are square pegs. These things need to be looked at and stopped, basically. We have issues with that. We have NAB workers, and of course, I always point to myself, the chair, or soon to be, I hope, the chair at NAB, or used to be the chair at NAB, where we have NAB workers, maybe not in this time, but in the time of my grandfather, before he even thought about coming into politics. One of them was actually, my grandfather would have been over 95, I think, practicing his signature He happened to tell us that the wedding will come off soon, so the will would have been about to be written and all of that. We have, no matter if they're high or low, corruption is definitely out there. I met somebody this week that one of the workers was able to tell me when they wanted to refer the patient, oh, he ain't got no money. How you know that he doesn't have any money? These things come from the lowest to the highest parts of government. These are the kind of things we need to look at. But we need, with the anti-corruption laws and so on, we need to have teeth. And let me explain what I mean. For instance, I'm on the pharmacy council. Who is responsible for pharmacies and pharmacy warehouses and seeing that people do not stock medications and drugs that they shouldn't? Now, every once in a while we get reports about over-the-counter stores, regular shops, stocking things that are only are provided by prescription. We organize a raid. If you could find a policeman to go with you in trouble, you raid the place, and then what? By the next week, they're back on the shelf because we have no real teeth. So it's okay to put these things in record, but if you can't do anything about it, you're still in trouble. We have the Public Accounts Committee, of which I'm a member, and of which this administration would have chaired, the Honorable Prime Minister at the time, the opposition would have chaired the last administration. I remember two ministers, it was two of them were called to the commission. I don't think we see them yet. And they were proud to be in the newspapers saying they ain't going away. We need the teeth. We have excuses coming out where we bring members to give evidence. Some flimsy excuses sometimes. We need the teeth. Although it's on paper, yes, we can do this, we can do that by law. Nothing is ever done. So at the same time, when we bring these things, the public needs to be reassured. The truth is, the proof of the pudding in this case has to be in the eating. It's all well and good for me to say when elections are called that yes, we have passed these bills, but then what? The truth is, we need to make an example, even if it's a matter of just coming to make a count of what has happened to the monies, what has happened to buildings that we can't find, contractors that have taken money and done bad jobs. And I agree with the honorable member of the opposition when he spoke about that in terms of making sure contractors, because now you could form a business and call yourself a contractor with no idea what a measuring tape looks like, or block for that matter, and get a job if you pay the right people or belong to the right party. That's basically almost traditional in Barbados, but these traditions need to come to an end. But so these are the areas I want to deal with, or wanted to deal with. Truth is, there is doubt within the public arena. There is doubt. People doubt politicians. People are saying all the parties are the same. What do we do to concrete the opposite thinking? That we can trust our politicians, their meaning to be right for us. I'm planning to leave here as I came. But I'm planning to leave things that will make a mark in this society. I, like the member for St. Thomas, want to leave as clean as I came. That's the truth. And every member, since I've been in here, I can't really pick up one member that I could say otherwise. Everybody in here seems to be quite honest, and I am proud of that. But we need to rebuild the public trust. And right now, even with COVID, people, they're wrong, but people are questioning the methods of the government, the COVID unit. You're seeing it for yourself. Videos coming out that the food ain't good and some fake news all over the place. Public trust needs to be regained, and I think this is an important step into doing that. Individuals have to be called into account for this to make sense, and the integrity legislation to make sense. Without that, it'd be just looking pretty. So, Mr. Speaker, these are my few contributions that I wanted to make to the House this evening, and I am grateful for your attention. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the second time in 2 weeks that this Parliament has had cause to debate legislation that has been extremely long overdue. The issue of corruption has previously not been treated with the seriousness that it deserved by any Parliament. It is a farce, sir, that legislators embodied with the trust of the people who elected them have previously ignored the fact that for ages now, our country that we love so dearly needed up-to-date, modern prevention of corruption legislation. And therefore, I applaud those responsible for bringing this legislation here to this Parliament today. Corruption, sir, has an indirect effect on a country's economic performance. It affects many factors. It affects economic growth. It affects the investment of a country, the levels of taxation, the composition and effectiveness of public expenditure. It creates inefficiencies in our governance structure, in our bureaucracy. It fuels wastage of resources. It undermines the efficiency of public expenditure. It undermines our social welfare system. It keeps people in poverty. And it creates a forum for the continuation of inequality in our society. And the reality, sir, is perhaps that those like myself who have been advocates for many years on and preaching for modern day prevention of corruption legislation have not properly explained to the people how corruption adversely affects them. It is true that people like the British philosopher Sir Edmund Burke said that among people generally corrupt, liberty cannot exist. But we have to translate this into real terms, sir. The reality of the situation, sir, is that as we speak today, Barbados' anti-corruption legislative thrust is based on a century-old Prevention of Corruption Act, Chapter 144, 1929, based on a British Act of 1917. Now, sir, when this legislation that still informs the corruption platform, anti-corruption platform in Barbados was passed, there was no thought of any computers, social media. Transnational crime really wasn't present, sir. I mean, there was an aftermath of a First World War, but drugs transshipment, major trafficking in women, sir, because remember, sir, airplanes were now starting out. There was no firm tax policy, mandate social welfare, because, I mean, the vast majority of people there anyway were just there to be carriers of wood, and certainly in Barbados, there for the enrichment of the sugar plantation and for our colonial masters, England. And that is what we are based on. Since 1981, sir, for 4 decades, effectively, parliaments of Barbados, managed by both political administrations, sir, have failed to bring in this legislation. So I think it started, as I said, in the 1981 administration of the then Right Honorable Tom Adams, late sir, tried to bring it in, didn't get it, integrity legislation. It died with the dissolution of Parliament in 1986. From 1994, sir, certainly Barbados Labour Party manifestos have spoken about bringing prevention of corruption legislation, contractor general legislation. I know, sir, the late Sir Richard Haynes, sir, who was one time leader of the opposition, Minister of Finance, who of course formed his own political party, spoke about bringing anti-corruption legislation, contractor general legislation. But, sir, I don't know. There didn't seem to be the political will by any previous parliament and administration to bring it in, sir, and that's unfortunate. It reached a height of folly, sir, political folly, under the last administration, Democratic Labour Party administration. And after all, sir, they rode on the backs of alleged corruption of the last Barbados Labour Party administration to get into office in 2008. One of the reasons why they got into office, sir, were allegations they made against the last Barbados Labour Party administration of corruption. I myself, sir, realized that the Barbados Labour Party was going to lose the January 2008 election when 3 weeks before that election at a Christmas party, person looked at me, we were in a group talking, drinking, sir, and person looked at me, we done with one a thief enough. That was has been a recurring decimal today. One a thief enough, it's time to let the other side get some of the thievery too. And there were in that group, sir, some people who I thought were strong supporters of the BLP, including a former BLP candidate who kept the mouth shut. In agreement with what the person said, I knew then that the BLP had lost the election. That is the truth. It was just a question of by how much. But having won that election, sir, on the basis, partly, certainly, significantly, in my opinion, of allegations of perceived corruption against the Barbados Labour Party, and promising to bring in prevention of corruption legislation within 100 days of coming into office, sir. That party was in office for in excess of 10 years, 4 months, went over their stay, and never brought in such legislation, sir. In 2012, as one of the last acts of Parliament, they passed a prevention of corruption bill, sir, which had as its final clause in the substantive act that it will come into force on a date fixed for proclamation. It was never proclaimed, sir. Before that, it came before Parliament in 2011 and was quickly rushed to a select committee, sir, with the clear intention, sir, of never passing that bill, or certainly having passed it in Parliament, never, quite frankly, bringing it into force. And you see the reasons for that, sir. When I got in Parliament, sir, was elected humbly to be member for St. James North in February 2013, I asked a senior government minister who used to act at one time as Prime Minister, sir, but why you all don't bring in the prevention of corruption legislation, having placed so much emphasis on it in the 2008 elections, having had it in your manifesto. At least, I must say that then member, sir, spoke honestly. He told me, you really think we're going to bring in legislation that can lock up with one another? At least he was honest, sir. Because the then Prime Minister, gave a lot of excuses that were untenable as to why they would not pass, or rather proclaim, the Prevention of Corruption Act. For one, he said how there was an overlap between a draft Integrity in Public Life Bill, sir, draft bill, sir, not an act, and the Prevention of Corruption Bill. And he used that as an excuse in September 2013, sir, for not bringing into force that act. He went on to say, sir, then in 2016, when the pressure was being kept on him, that the Barbados had anti-corruption legislation, sir. Like he said, referring to the 1929 Act, it is not true to say that it is not on our statute books, and that act was not what was good enough. But that act, sir, the maximum penalty was $2,400, and the prosecution had to be by the Director of Prosecutions, Public Prosecutions, as you, sir, as a criminal lawyer of note, well aware, had to be brought within 6 months of the act being committed, sir. Well, but these kind of crimes, corrupt practices, are in many instances not revealed within 6 months. I mean, it takes much longer in a lot of cases to gather evidence and to get witnesses to bring it. But that satisfied the then Prime Minister, who, of course, was a senior lawyer, sir, having qualified same time as me, sir. And he knew better, sir. I'm not saying that he ought to know better. He knew that he was not speaking with honesty to the people of Barbados when he said that, sir. And then you had an Attorney General then, sir, under the last administration, sir, Chief Legal Advisor by the Constitution to the people and government of Barbados, saying that people who were calling for prevention of corruption legislation were making silly noises, sir. That is what he used, and he was referring to people like me, sir, because from 2010, I was writing in the newspaper before I was an MP, sometimes in guest columns. I have all the articles right here in this file. I looked back at them last night, sir, calling for prevention of corruption legislation. Then when I got in Parliament, February 2013, I continued from the floor of Parliament talking about it. But he said we were making silly noises and that it would be too costly to bring into force such legislation because you would need a commission to monitor and investigate alleged corrupt practices. And he said, sir, that his ministry had better things to do with the money, that it wasn't a priority, and that corruption was not a significant issue in Barbados. Well, I don't know what Barbados he lived in, sir. That is the truth. You know, members of the last administration, sir, as I used to tell them, all of them born in poverty, sir, except one of them, who now say he won't come back and run, sir. I don't know. He was the only one that born with a gold spoon in his mouth. He then used to act, former member for St. Michael South Central, sir. He was the only one with the gold spoon, sir. All the rest born poor, but then suddenly, sir, when they got in Parliament, as you know, sir, the big, and they have totally disconnected from the Barbados people. So I don't know where he lived that he could say corruption was not a significant issue in Barbados, sir. Corruption is a big issue in this country. The fact of the matter is, yes, a lot of people turn a blind eye to it, but it's big. Revenue collecting agencies, and I don't have to name them, but we know what they are: income tax, NOBRA, customs, immigration, town planning office. Traditionally, sir, officers in those departments, licensing authority, taking bribes, sir. Men that I know with 4 houses working in those departments, And the outside woman got a house too that to give. You can't justify that, sir, on the salaries that they made, sir, as a public servant, sir. And therefore, this bill before Parliament today has a provision speaking about unexplained property, sir, that if you have property that your income, your level of resources shows that you should not have, and your public officials, sir, as defined by the Act, you have to account for it, sir. And I mean, you can't show that your great aunt left it to you in a will. So how you get it? And this bill speaks towards that, sir. This bill speaks, in fact, to a person exercising public functions. That is what it speaks to. And that covers the whole ambit of people in the public service. This bill, sir, also speaks towards bribery and penalizes bribery by both the corruptor and the corruptee. And that's important, sir. Both the person who corrupted and the person who corrupts them, sir. Both sense. And both in public sector and in private sector, sir. Because don't let's fool ourselves. There isn't only corruption and corrupt practices in the public service, sir. There is in the private sector too. And this bill speaks to this too. Now, sir, as the Honourable Member for St. James Central, sir, my neighbouring colleague, sir, in terms of constituency, said this is not a perfect bill. So, I mean, and you and I are lawyers, sir. You know, there'll never be perfection in life, period, far less in a piece of legislation, because circumstances change and you can't take into account everything. It is not a perfect bill, but it is a start. After 100 years, sir, 1929, we can't be proud of that. We, sir, the Barbados Labour Party's last administration, would have signed the United Nations Convention Against Corruption on the 10th of December 2003, sir, 18 years ago. That convention was adopted by the United Nations on the 31st of August 2003. In other words, we signed it, sir, just over a month after it was adopted by the UN. And as you know full well, when you sign a document as a country, at an international level, a treaty, a convention, you have the authority and the obligation to pass it into domestic law. That is how our system operates. It doesn't automatically become law of the country as it does in some countries such as the United States. You have to pass it in your internal legislative assembly for it to become law. For 18 years, we have not passed that law, sir, as we were obliged internationally to do, because by that we have committed ourselves internationally to it. This bill incorporates as its schedule that United Nations treaty. Finally, sir, because as I used to tell the last administration, Barbados was one of the 3 countries in the world, only 3, that had not passed that convention into its domestic law after having signed it at the United Nations. And that's shameful. But yet we had politicians, top politicians, Prime Minister and Attorney General in the last administration telling you about how, man, we don't need this because corruption is insignificant. When every single day people thief in both government and private sector. And sir, that, sir, as I said, because our duty is to translate to the public of Barbados how corruption affects countries. In many cases, sir, corruption affects about 10% of the gross domestic product of countries, sir. In Barbados, it is estimated that corruption and corrupt practices deprives the people of Barbados by about $500 million a year, sir. They had that study in the last decade. 500 million. Because when, sir, as in the last administration, a private corporation, sir, gave a minister of government a BMW, sir, costing $400,000. And sir, this was laid as a document of the House, sir. We laid this as a document of the House. The now Prime Minister laid it, sir, and I remember that debate very well because I spoke on it too. When this private corporation gives a minister of government who's saying that he running next election, sir, I can't believe my ears. BMW X5 Jeep black Transdeck, sir. Well, as I said, it's laid as a document of the House, sir. $400,000, and he used to drive it into Parliament, sir. In fact, when I mentioned it one time, he said, sir, nobody can stop him driving the vehicle. But it was licensed, sir, in the name of Transdeck Inc., but it was driving, I don't know where it is, Honourable Member, but I know where it was at that time. And sir, so when now his statutory boards, of which he was minister over, would give these corporations money, sir, you think that when they have to give him a $400,000 vehicle, sir, that, who paying for that, sir? The taxpayers, sir. So the contract is inflated by $400,000 plus. Ironically, sir, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East watching, no, I sure he enjoying what we hearing. When now the contract is inflated now by $400,000 plus, sir, the taxpayers of Barbados paying for that, sir. That is how it gets on, sir. And then you get situations and Public Accounts Committee, sir, and this is what I think has the people of Barbados real vexed. Because these things come out in Public Accounts Committee. Public Accounts Committee investigated Transport Board, right? That was had the then minister, the then member of Parliament for St. Philip North, of whom the now minister, member for St. Philip North just spoke, had oversight, sir. And millions of dollars gone through the headers there too. And taxpayers paying for that too, sir, because when now a company replaces machinery twice, in fact 3 and 4 times in 6 months, sir, on buses, sir, the charging for that, and they had cases before the Public Accounts Committee documents where the same piece of equipment getting charged 4 times. And Transport Board paying them, sir. And then you had National Housing, where the then minister, then member for St. Lucie, sir, refused to go to Parliament, sir. Sorry, before the Public Accounts Committee, and the same then member for St. Philip North too, refusing to go before a Public Accounts Committee, constitutionally set up to investigate lack of prudent fiscal management and transparency and accountability. So that is the kind of thing that we had to go through, sir, and that under the last administration, sir. And you're hearing that some of these people won't come back, sir. You know, to run, sir. So this is the issue, sir, that we are dealing with today. That people, therefore, the public of Barbados, citizens have to pay more money in taxes through this corruption and bribery and inefficiencies in the system. Social welfare suffers. Waste of resources, and people get poor. A government then doesn't have, like, incoming government now of the Barbados Labour Party, faced with all it has to face, doesn't have therefore the money to repair roads in Aston Hall, sir, my constituency, that I would love to get repaired, sir. All the roads bad. I can't get any repaired because thievery, corrupt practices, and the last government, sir, I mean combined, sir, of course, with a hurricane, with COVID. So this is the reality of the situation. As I said, sir, it's not a perfect bill, but it is a certain start. We had to move on. It is long overdue. We promised this legislation, sir. We've been promising it since our manifestos of 1994 and 1999, sir. It is true that it is part of a suite of legislation, sir, which also needs to come to Parliament. The integrity in public life, I believe the Honourable Attorney General would have spoken earlier today when he presented this bill on those. It needs to come with that because that is part of the whole suite. Whistleblower legislation to give protection to people now who will speak out against corruption and say that Minister X asked them for bribes and the paid Minister X money, right, the 10% cut, as one minister told me that he used to ask for. Where's the minister's 10% cut under the last administration, sir? And it is strange that the Honourable Minister for People's Empowerment looked back at me and laughed. She must be know whether that is the minister who she would have succeeded in that ministry, who am I talking about? But that is what we face, and needs and is being addressed today by this bill. We need freedom of information legislation, and we shouldn't be frightened for it, sir. These are standard form legislations that other countries in the Caribbean have had for decades to allow the public access to information. So there's no secret, there's nothing to hide. It's taxpayers' money that paying for ministerial government. And there shouldn't be any fear in allowing the public access to such information. Contractor general legislation, sir, as I said, to oversee distribution of contracts, sir, and awarding of public contracts, sir, is needed. And sir, I'm calling for these things, sir, not because I like standing up here talking, sir, but because it is required and because it affects people like myself, sir. Because I'm tired hearing that all politicians are the same, all y'all in the same political class, all y'all are friends, all are one of us. I'm not in that, sir. If I wanted, sir, to continue making money, I would have stopped in law, sir. I would not come in this, sir. And sir, right now, I am, of course, nearer to the end of my elective political career than I am to the beginning, sir. So I'm free to speak on these things. I believe, sir, that like Singapore, though, we need to have better terms and conditions of remuneration for ministers and members of Parliament. I would say that, sir. And the immediate former member of St. George North, in fact, up to his last speech here in Parliament, spoke about that. I believe in the Singapore model, that you pay your ministers and your MPs properly, and you catch them taking bribes to spend the rest of their life in jail. Because there's no excuse. Because the excuse of these former politicians of the last administration, you know, they never, a lot of them would tell you, man, I never see money like this yet, man. Why, you know how much, that they had all of this money in the world, sir? That's the truth. One of them tell me that. So, as was said earlier, that particular minister, every 6 months used to be driving in a new vehicle into Parliament Yard, sir. They used to be unashamed about it. But if you pay them properly, sir, they should not, and I'm not excusing that, sir, giving an excuse because they're not paid properly. It's no excuse because you get into politics, elective politics, knowing what the money is. And you shouldn't be looking for anything on top, sir. You know? I mean, one night, sir, before the election, and I will say this, sir, some honorable members and myself, sir, met with an official of a statutory board, of which there was, well, the Public Accounts Committee, sir, spoke to it, so it's a record of Parliament, sir. Barbados Water Authority. I think the honorable member for St. James Central spoke about it today. $1.49 billion gone through the headers. 1.49 billion, or I think it was the leader of the opposition. And we worked out with an official of the Barbados Water Authority, and he felt free to speak to us because he was about to retire, sir. So he felt free. We worked out that a particular individual had got between 12 and $15 million in bribes, sir, from the contracts. Between 12 and $15 million, sir. So that when I heard that in an inebriated state, that particular person one night said he ain't care about nobody. He got $15 million stored away. We was telling the truth again, sir. At least he was honest. So, sir, this is the kind of thing, and all politicians are unfortunately classified as that, sir. I'm not in that, sir. I didn't come into politics to that, on that presumption. The honourable members for St. Thomas spoke about an attempt to bribe us, sir. I, as minister, sir, could speak towards two of those situations. I totally rejected them. I suspect that ultimately, sir, there are people who, because I was very straight, made complaints about me to others, false complaints. Of course, we all know of the situation where I intervened to stop trafficking of women into this country, sir. A corrupt practice, totally corrupt practice, by deporting the women, and got cussed blind blue and sent her globally, sir, in a voice note. You know, and sir, but I stand by my principles, sir. I stand by my principles because my father would roll in his grave if he ever were to hear that I was corrupt. He would say, well, son, it's time to come and join me, sir. And the Lord would, in all right, say, yes, I am going to have him join you now. Because, sir, that is not part of my DNA and will never be, sir. You know, sir, the issue of the distribution of contracts and award of contracts to certain people. So look, sir, I try to be practical, sir. At my age and stage, sir, I can't be anything else. The problem in our country is that there are too few people with real wealth. There are too few people with real wealth. We have to, and we have a duty as a government, sir, to distribute this wealth on a more equitable basis. I think the honourable member for St. James Central spoke a bit about it today, sir. It can't be that you only have a handful of people in this country having wealth and who could fund projects, and therefore whoever in office, sir, got to go to these same people and give them contracts, sir. It can't be that. That has to stop, sir. People of the color of virtually everybody in this house got to get some of this wealth too, sir. And I caution politicians present and those aspiring to be politicians, whatever political party you want to run in, sir, to be careful on this situation. Because we now bringing in legislation that can catch you. And I want the whistleblower legislation that's going to empower people to come and give the evidence where they have the evidence. Because one of the problems in this country, sir, as was referred to earlier today, is that they have too many people frightened for the shadow that the body puts out when they walk. Man, you know, my nephew going to get hurt. My granddaughter, they're going to get victimized. We need to rid people of that belief and have them come forward and give the evidence of bribery and corrupt practices in this country, sir. So the issue, and I am urging, sir, because they tell me I'm a senior member of parliament in here, so I've been everything, backbencher, minister,
You remember has 2 more minutes.
opposition, MP, sir. I cautioning everyone to not to get themselves involved, not to be tempted by people who can come and offer you bribes for contracts, sir. It ain't worth it. Damaging your reputation, your character, influence by this, sir. I also going to caution, sir. I noticed a trend that people who were rejected totally by the electorate 3.5 years ago in a general election, now seeking to find solace in the Barbados Labour Party. Why you don't know? The people reject them out of hand, sir. I mean, a lot of them, sir, couldn't show the face after last election and when they walking with their head down in public, you know. But the honourable member for the city expresses his intention to retire from politics, sir. A man of tremendous integrity, sir. Tremendous integrity. An officer and a gentleman. And within 2 days of his announced intention to retire, his opponent hands in a membership application to the Barbados Labour Party, sir. I see these things and I wonder what kind of madness this is that going on. And someone who had serious allegations of corruption against them, sir. The honourable member for St. James Central here sitting down in front of me, he was minister over a statutory board that employed the individual and given a contract 2 months before the election to continue as CEO of that organization. So I mean, these kind of things. Yeah, sir. No, sir. Let me clarify, sir. The honourable member for St. James Central was not minister at that time. I'm talking about this happened under the previous Democratic Labour Party administration, sir. And I don't know. These kind of things whereby the general public feel that all politicians are the same. People can jump from one party to the next. It don't matter. They're all friends. They're all in the same political class, sir. I'm not part of that. I came into politics, sir, with one purpose only, to try to help people. All right? People with disabilities, old people, sir, young people, sir. Whenever I leave, sir, I leave in with my principles and character intact, sir, and your integrity, because there's no money. The $15 million that minister boasted about can't replace the destruction of his integrity, sir. Not in my opinion, at least. Not in my opinion. We need, and I hope, sir, that the Ministry of Finance gives the resources to empower this piece of legislation, Because there's no use us passing this legislation here today and we don't give the resources to pursue the investigation of corruption, sir, and the prevention and prosecution of corrupt practices. We have to give the resources to the authorities, relevant authorities, so that it could be pursued. So the majority of people in Barbados who think on these things, believe that the time has long come for big ups to get locked up like anybody else, that if somebody from Western or Bayland could get locked up for stealing 2 tins of sardines from a supermarket, that somebody should get locked up for bribes of $500,000, sir. And they're correct. And therefore, sir, I'm happy to see the extent of the penalties in this bill, sir, up to $1.5 million, sir, or 10 years imprisonment or both. That is the maximum penalty. Others are, I think, $750,000. And the previous bill under the Democratic Labour Party, the 2020 bill that they refused to bring into law, sir, had essentially penalties of $500,000 or 5 years in jail. So this is an improvement on that, sir. There's also
Remember,
Yes,
you
sir.
need to wind up, please.
Yes, sir, I will. There's also a clause, section 17(1), sir. Clause 18, section 18, which speaks to presumption of corruption. So in other words, the burden of proof will shift onto the accused to show that there was no corruption, sir, in this situation. And these are provisions in this law that are honorable, that show good intention to the public, sir. The United Nations Convention speaks towards a code of standard of conduct being put in place by the government for the correct and honorable and proper performance of public functions. So I would urge that statutory corporations, government departments have a code, a standard of conduct that all their officials are bound by. And just like similarly how workplaces have been urged to put in sexual harassment, code of conduct, and other issues such as that, sir. Proverbs 17:23 speaks about a wicked man takes a bribe secretly to pervert the ways of justice, sir. And we have to have a new culture in this country against corruption and against corrupt practices. It can't be that people feel that this is the way of life of Barbados, because it destroys the country. And I've realized that, sir, when I was at a law convention, International Bar Association convention, about 20 years ago. I think it was in Singapore, where a large part, a whole session of that conference was on anti-corruption. And I then fully understood how corrupt practices undermines the country and how it, in fact, lowers your levels in terms of international standing. Transparency International has written a lot of
Honourable member.
Yes, sir. My last sentence, sir. I thank you. And we must be brought into being as politicians and lead the way in the anti-corruption drive in this country. I thank you, sir, for your indulgence of me over the period of time.
Honourable member Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, I have been tasked with breaking the legislation down in a little bit more of a granular fashion so people can understand what it is that we're purporting to do and what provisions are actually there, who they affect, what's the extent, the ramifications, and some thoughts behind it. I also, at the end of my address, intend to deal with some of the concerns specifically raised by the Honourable Member for St. Andrew and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition with respect to the contributions by the Integrity Group Barbados and the Barbados Bar Association as to what those actual concerns were, how they were dealt with, if they were dealt with, and just to advise so that people don't think there's any mischief, sir. So I'll be full but be relatively brief. Sir, allow me to start by saying I actually think that this piece of legislation is a beautiful piece of legislation. Laws often are written so that lawyers can understand them and nobody else. So that sometimes when you read a piece of legislation, that if you didn't see the title to it, you might have no clue as to what it's actually addressing. That is not the case with this piece of legislation. This is one of the most easy to read pieces of legislation I've ever come across. My wife caught me, sir. Sorry, that sounds really bad. My wife saw me behind my computer smiling. I said, "What are you smiling about? What's so interesting?" I said, "This is such a fantastic piece of legislation." And
I remember not listening to the SIs.
Sir, but
Pay no attention
I'm
to the
saying that I
SIs.
could not have been more pleased had it been. But I'm saying in this event, sir, it was actually sheer thrill at reading a very comprehensive and easy to understand piece of legislation. Sir, if we go from the beginning, the objects and reasons are set out very, very simply at page 1, that the bill will provide for the prevention, investigation, and prosecution of acts of corruption. And sir, then we go from there. We go to the definition section, which sets out what certain terms mean. We don't say bribes, right? You don't necessarily say inducement, but they do use inducement. But this is captured in advantage, and advantage has an exceedingly wide definition, sir, which includes any money or any gift, loan, free, reward, bonus, commission, discount. You get the idea. Any status, increase in status or honor or contract or employment, any entry into academic institution or course, or any grant, any forbearance, any avoidance of a loss, liability, or penalty, any discharge, liquidation, payment, release of any loan, any residential or hotel accommodation, any exercise. You get the point, sir. Any offer. So it is perhaps the widest possible definition of advantage, and advantage is at the core of this. Do you gain an advantage, or do you accept an advantage in order to do what you're supposed to do, normally what you're paid to do, right? Do you gain an advantage to not do what it is that you're actually paid to do? So advantage is the word that is used, sir, instead of the word bribe, and it is the widest possible definition of advantage. But that wide definition does not necessarily prejudice people, because the act itself deals majority on intent. Did you accept this with the intention of doing X, Y, and Z? That becomes important, but I'll get to that shortly, sir. Income, money or money's worth, derived from whatever source or acquired in Barbados or elsewhere, whether directly or indirectly. This is again another wide definition. It's not limiting us to tracing assets or looking for evidence in Barbados, but also overseas. It's not just looking at money, it's looking at what money can buy. If it's not actually proceeds of money, it's looking at money's worth. Instead of accepting $1,000, they take a free stay in a hotel, that sort of thing. So, and persons exercising public functions include public officers, members, CEOs, managers, directors, employees of state-owned enterprises, etc., sir. And I won't go through all of it, sir. Property means assets of every kind, whether situated in Barbados or elsewhere, whether real or personal, tangible or intangible, and includes money and legal documents, instruments, etc., sir. So the definitions are very, very, very wide, sir. Offering, soliciting, or accepting an advantage. For the purpose of this act, a person offers an advantage where he or any person acting on his behalf, directly or indirectly, gives, affords, holds out, or agrees, undertakes, or promises to give or hold out any advantage to any other person. It's wide. We deal, sir, with bribery. Bribery is at paragraph 4. A person who offers an advantage to a person exercising public functions as an inducement to or reward for otherwise on account of his performing or refraining from performing any act in his capacity as a person exercising public functions, his expending, delaying, hindering, or preventing the performance of an act, his assisting, favoring, hindering, or delaying any person in a transaction of any business with a public authority. So, once again, sir, it is, if I offer you something with the intention of you doing something along the lines, Barbados is a small society. So, in discussing this with someone, I like to bounce these off of people. What do you understand by this? Person said, but if you as a politician, if you as somebody in the SOE have a friend who owns a hotel and your friend offers you to stay for a weekend with your wife, right? Does that now make you liable for examination? I said, no, people who are operating in good faith have nothing to fear. If we are friends and this is something that we do, then it is easy defendable. This is a friendship. I stay at Collins Beach House on a weekend. I've done it before I was in politics. I do it now. Colin takes my... I was sick. So I picked an easy name. Had I picked A, sorry, I would have gone with Abrams. Had I picked B, I would have gone with Brathwaite. So I just went with C with Colin, right? But the point is, it is not simply that you have availed yourself of what may otherwise constitute an advantage under the Act. It is, was this offered to you with the intention that you would do or not do something? And did you accept it knowing that you were expected by virtue of accepting to do or not do something? So people need not worry. I mean, we get free lunches. People offer you things. People say, you know, man, you look tired. You look tired, Kerry. You look strung out. Kerry, man, come and stay at my place. Eddie, you look hungry. Come and have lunch. But if nothing is following behind that, so then it is okay. So, they also look at bribery in relation to contracts and tenders. That has a whole section all by itself, sir. A person who offers an advantage to the person exercising public functions as an inducement or reward for otherwise on account of his given assistance or using his real or supposed influence for the promotion, procuring, or execution of any contract with a public authority or any subcontract under a contract, etc., etc. Once again, at every turn, it is the intention, what was intended. Did you do this with the expectation of getting something else? And did the person receive also understand that to be the case? I go again, if you're doing it with clean hands, you have nothing to worry about. So one that I never even thought of, bribery in relation to auctions, sir. Do I extend an inducement to you to participate in an auction for the purpose of driving the price up, or not participate in an auction? Let's say MTW was supposed to go into an auction trying to bid for buses. If MTW starts to bid for the buses, or the transport board starts to bid for the buses, and I am also bidding for the same bus, their pockets deeper than mine, that drives the price up. Do I then slip a man $1,000 and say, buddy, don't bid on this bus? So these are all of the things contemplated by this. So when people talk about this legislation actually not going far enough, this legislation actually covers what it was supposed to cover. There are other things that have been raised by the Honourable Leader of Opposition that stand to be covered in other legislation, but insofar as what was contemplated by this legislation, it is exceedingly, exceedingly thorough. It also deals with corrupt transactions with agents. So not just the CEO or the heads of statutory corporations. If I designate somebody to go and do something, to participate in an evaluation, participate in a bid, and they don't do it, or they don't do it as I directed them to, then they can also be liable as agents of myself, and I, the person offering the inducement, can also be liable for dealing with an agent, somebody low down the line. And let's take that to an extreme. So that would then cover, sir, persons like officials, testing officers in licensing authority. I'm not speaking to a specific example, but I'm saying someone of that level as opposed to the chief licensing officer. So once the person is connected to a statutory corporation or an official functionary, then that person could also be liable for receiving an inducement, and somebody who attempts to induce them can also be liable as if it was the principal of the corporation or the functionary itself. Sir, they also deals with disclosure orders, and I'm glad to see it preserves the privilege, sir. So the normal privilege that one expects in relation to attorneys and clients is also preserved by this. It is a fundamental concept in our law that a man has a right to get legal advice, and to get legal advice you have to be able to tell your lawyer everything. And this, a lot of people fight and rail against this, but this is necessary for the law to actually function, because a man has to be able to present his best defense to be able to defend himself, and there's a presumption, sir, of innocence until proven otherwise. Interestingly, in this same piece of legislation, that presumption is overturned, but for a specific reason. Now, sir, the offense of tipping off. Now, tipping off did not occur in any other anti-corruption or any other legislation like that we have, but tipping off is a real thing. I did a case, one of the last cases that I did before I went fully into politics, sir, involved an overseas entity trying to proceed against somebody here. And there was concern that the person here had been tipped off and managed to destroy all their records before the entity was able to execute an order against them. But tipping off, the simple act of calling someone to say, listen, the police coming by you shortly. Now, I am not actively participating in a crime. We didn't recognize it before. I guess the nearest thing that they can catch me on would have been impeding an investigation or obstructing an investigation. But can I obstruct an investigation which has not actually yet started? But this covers even that base. So if anyone in the system alerts someone that these things are coming, or that they're a person of interest and allows them to put themselves in a better position that had they not gotten that information, that person is also guilty of an offense. That's why I'm telling you, sir, it is wide. It is very, very wide. Evidence of unexplained property. Now this, my learned friend from St. James North, I think, related to this. Nobody takes a bribe and puts it in their bank account. I mean, you would be a very, very simple criminal to do that. Immediately traceable. If I make $5,000 a month, sorry, deposit $1 million, then, I mean, come on, I would have a hard time explaining myself even to my mother, who believes in her son. So you then look at what does the person have that does not make sense. If I live in a chattel house, part out front of which is a yacht on a trailer, then, sir, I might have to explain why do I have a yacht on a trailer in front of my chattel house. If I work in a job that makes me a certain salary, let's go with $5,000 a month because it's a convenient figure to use. If I work in a job that gives me $5,000 a month, sir, and I have all the time lived in this bungalow, all of a sudden, sir, nothing else has changed. I'm still in the same job, but I have an upstairs, downstairs house and a set of apartments in my name. Then I can be called upon to explain that they don't. I started with the definition of the asset, sir, is money or money's worth. So you might not be able to trace any payment to me. You may never be able to trace that anybody gave me the $100,000. But I may then have to be asked and answer why I have assets that are not commensurate with my standard of life or my ability to earn. And quite frankly, sir, if you bought it, you need to be able to say how you got it. Now, there's a presumption of corruption, sir, in certain places, in certain cases. Our law, as you well know, sir, operates on the standard, and the most basic principle is innocent until proven guilty. Everybody has heard that. People don't necessarily understand what it means, but everybody knows you're innocent until proven guilty. A man should be able to say nothing in his own defense and unless the Crown manages to establish his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard under our law, beyond a reasonable doubt. This is as close to certainty as you can get without being 100% certain. Unless the Crown is able to establish that against you, or after the 30th of November, sir, the state is able to establish that against you, then you're free to go. But what this says now is that in certain circumstances, where in any proceedings for an offense under Section 4 or Section 812 is proved that the accused gave or accepted an advantage, the advantage shall be presumed to have been given or accepted as such inducement or reward as is alleged in any particulars of the offense, unless on a balance of probabilities the contrary is proved. Let's go back to the hotel offer. So, if it comes out that something dodgy went on with a person, and it's established that I took a hotel stay from them, that I accepted to go to their villa for a weekend, and fingers start to point in my direction, then the law is now going to assume, if I had an involvement in their transaction, the law will assume now that it was done with improper motive. However, I go once again. If I've done nothing wrong, I should simply be able to prove that. So while normally the state has to prove that I'm guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, the presumption has shifted to me, which is an unusual thing in law. But in this instance, I don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt I'm innocent. I have to simply prove on a balance of probabilities. I establish the merest possible defense that 51% leans towards me, then I'm gone clear. I don't have to get to 75 or 80%, which is usually the standard for beyond a reasonable doubt. So this legislation, because it is very hard where no money can be found to establish that corruption happened. So in some cases where all the factors tie in, the court is prepared to accept the presumption of corruption, but you have to discharge it on the merest burden. The lowest standard in the law is a balance of probabilities. That's the lowest standard you can get. Once I establish beyond a balance, on a balance of probabilities, that there was nothing untoward in this, then the case against me is dismissed. So although the burden of proof is on me, I don't have the same burden in proving my innocence that the state has in proving my guilt. Sir, Section 19, certain defenses are not available. Now, we hardly ever see this in the law. This is a recent addition to the laws, sir, and I will read the section so people can understand what the section is, and people will probably understand where it came from. Where in any proceedings for an offense under any section of Part 2, it is proved that the accused accepted an advantage, believing or suspecting or having grounds to believe or suspect that the advantage was given as an inducement or reward for otherwise on account of his doing or refraining from doing any act, blah, 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 sir. It shall not be a defense that the advantage is customary in any profession, trade, vocation, or calling. This, sir, was purported to be used as a defense in a recent case in the United States. That receiving donations was part and parcel of the culture of Barbados in doing business. Inducements were accepted as standard in certain instances. So it became necessary, sir, or out of an abundance of caution, and this, I believe, was introduced as one of the amendments that was referred to or was suggested from the bar or from Integrity Group Barbados. But out of an abundance of caution, this particular piece of legislation decided to actually say that certain things you can't use. So whether here in Barbados or whether in proceedings arising out of this, because in some instances, sir, if you're charged, let's say in the United States, what you're being charged with has to be an offense where it was committed. So if you're being charged for, I don't know, mail fraud or something, the core offense had to be an offense in Barbados for them to be able to mount and sustain the charge against you in the United States. So you're saying that in Barbados, everybody does it and nobody ever is charged for it. Now goes away with this this particular section in the legislation. As I said, sir, it is very, very thorough. I wasn't calling any names, sir, but I said people are probably familiar with the situation. Now, corruption is very easy to allege. In law, they say rape is easy to allege, so it has to be difficult to prove. Right? That's a standard in law. Equally, corruption. I can say anything. I can say that the honorable member, I pick an honorable member, the honorable member just got into politics and bought a Land Rover. I can say that. I can say I saw the honorable member driving in the Land Rover with a drug dealer. And the inference is there. I can suggest now to the persons investigating, you might want to check him for this. So because, sir, it is so easy to allege, it leaves itself open for mischief. So the deterrent for malicious people has to be something that they can see and understand, and that they can see the consequences of it as well. So this actually sets out as an offense to make the malicious complaints and explains what happened to people who actually drift down that direction. Sir, that is pretty much the sections in the legislation I wanted to point to specifically. Let me just end on the legislation itself by saying, read it. For those who are listening, read it. It is not written in tricky legal language. It is not that hard to digest. It is very, very simply set out in a chronological and a logical sense that makes it very, very easy to follow. It is also necessary for people to actually know what is or is not now permitted. So, persons have spoken here today and said, well, this is the way we do it. You know, cut a fella a break, a little piece for me, and a little piece for you, right? Put yourself in the know so you now understand that what happened before is no longer to be tolerated, and you know exactly where the lines are drawn, and you know what you may have to establish if the finger is pointed at you. So, sir, having said that, I want to just go very quickly to, to dealing specifically with the comments from Integrity Group Barbados and from the Barbados Bar Association. These were touched upon, these were raised, as I said, by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and by the member for St. Andrew. And a number of people have actually been asking who weighed in on it. When this came up last week or previously, sir, it was out there in the public that certain comments were not taken into consideration. Now, I have in front of me, and I'll make it a document. I'll actually get the original thing from the AG's office and make it a document of the House. But every single suggestion that was raised by Integrity Group Barbados and the Bar Association, every single one was considered. If it was capable of being incorporated, it was. If it was the subject of a subsequent piece of legislation, then it was noted to be addressed in that piece of legislation. But every single one was put out in full. The comment and the full response. I'm just going to give you an idea of some of them, sir, so you can understand what it is that we took into consideration. So, the Integrity Group's initial general observation was that it was unable to ascertain the explicit dovetailing in the draft presented to them. Right? And the response was, it's not necessary for a piece of legislation to cross-reference one another or be part of a suite of legislation that addresses particular or related problems. The connection becomes more evident in the implementation of the legislation. So I don't need to say to specifically cross-reference the anti-corruption bill with the proceeds of crime legislation, with tracing legislation, with whatever. You don't need to do that. The comment in relation to preamble and international law that the previous Prevention of Corruption bill provided references to certain international laws, conventions, which the bill was trying to bring in force. This new bill does not. That was the comment raised. The response to that is that there are different means by which treaties can be incorporated into law. Sometimes in a draft bill, treaties are stated to have the force of law without them actually being annexed. Sometimes they're annexed without a statement, meaning that they have the force of law. The drafter in this instance, I think it was Justice Sherman Moore, just simply took a different approach. That is the approach of incorporating the mandatory aspects of the treaties without actually referring to them. So some aspects of the treaties are actually addressed and touched upon, but it's not necessarily said that this section was a part of that treaty, but they have been incorporated. But in light of the concern, sir, and however, and to signal that the conventions are still being implemented, a reference to the two main conventions has been included in the bill. Sir, comment 2, definitions. Why were the definitions of act of corruption or corruption removed? Response. This question seems to be based on a comparison of the Instant Bill and the Prevention of Corruption Act 2012, and the perceived differences between the two and the presumption that the 2012 Act formed the sole basis for the new bill. That is not the case. The definitions were not removed. There was no absolute need for such definitions in the bill. However, although that was the position of the drafter, because we're trying to actually just incorporate the comments of person and make the bill as tight as possible, we still put a definition of corruption in, sir. Penalties, in relation to penalties should be consistent and in one single place in the bill. Now, the issue of placement of penalties, sir, is a matter of style, drafting style and convention. And the drafters here were satisfied with the placement and the position of the provisions. So when we look at a piece of legislation, let's say Offences Against the Person Act, they may in that act have defined what sexual assault is. And following that, the part that deals with sexual assault, they may put in what the penalty is, summary or indictment. They shift on to something else, wounding. And then at the end of discussing wounding, they then put in what the penalties for wounding is. So you don't necessarily have to run through the whole piece of legislation and at the end say, here's a schedule of the offenses and these are the penalties. It's a drafting style. Once the penalties are in there, that anybody looking at the piece of legislation can say, well, I know that if I commit this offense, I'm liable for this on indictment or this summarily. And they're certain in there, then it doesn't actually matter where you put them, but they're in. Sir, the glaring absence, and this is the comment of the Integrity Legislation, the Integrity Group Barbados, that the Integrity Group Barbados does not support the bill in its current incarnation as it fails to provide for the corruption of public life through political money. Response, sir, we know we have to take a position on this as a government, and this is a matter that needs to be addressed. However, this should form the basis of a separate comprehensive piece of legislation if we do go that route. It does not fall easily or naturally to be considered under this. Sir, they talked about the absence of an extraterritorial effect, and a provision inserted in the bill to speak to this matter. Sir, I'm not going to go through all, but the point is this. Every single comment that was raised was considered, a response given, and an explanation given, and then the decision was made whether to include it in or not include it in. So it's not that, as was suggested, that the AG or the drafters didn't have time to read the legislation. Everything you want in a piece of legislation, sir, is not necessarily going to be in there. If we're dealing with a suite of legislation, then chances are by the time the AG has put his entire suite before Parliament, all of the concerns that were raised will have been addressed in at least one of those pieces of legislation. So, sir, I will just end on this. I won't say it's an anecdote, sir, because it's very, very true. The way we do business has changed. The way we do business as a government has changed. What is expected from us by people has also changed. I have a particular constituent, I hope he's listening, who has said to me severally and variously, sir, but go and tell the people to do X, Y, and Z. You're the minister. Send the person down there for a job, right? When they turn up there, let them say the minister send them. You're the minister. You can sign this. You're the minister. You can pardon this. You're the minister. That does not work anymore. And the concept by Barbadians that ministers are all powerful and don't answer to anybody, that needs to disappear. Because I will, for Abrams, ain't get in jail for a fella. If I go to jail, sir, actually, let me never go there. Let me stick with my initial statement that I am not going to jail for a fellow. The rules are there, the rules are getting tighter, the accountability is getting more certain, and the penalty, sir, are getting absolute. So, let's just say, sir, if I go, I don't like being by myself, sir, I will make sure to carry at least one person with me. Sir, the point simply is we need to actually understand the rules. Once everybody understands the rules and the rules are certain, then those who breach have to answer for their breaches. But the rules have to be certain, they have to be easy to be followed, easy to be understandable, and applied with some degree of common sense. Because we also have to take some cognizance of the society in which we live and the culture under which we operate. I am comfortable having read this bill, sir, that it serves the purpose for which it has been drafted. As I said in the beginning, I think it's a beautiful piece of legislation. It's beautiful in its simplicity, and it should be beautiful in its application. And the political will to see this through is there, and the political will to see that persons are investigated and prosecuted, and that we stamp out corruption so that people can no longer say, all your politicians are the same. That will, sir, is concrete, it is certain, and is absolute within the Barbados Labour Party and this government. So with those few words, I thank you, sir. I support the bill.
I member for Christchurch South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There's a sense in which the pending passage of this legislation invites close scrutiny of all high-ranking public officials and politicians in this country. And indeed, I go a little further and say that it places the reputations of all politicians on trial. I do not see this debate as an occasion for sanctimony or any righteous indignation against that pervasive public suspicion, nor do I see this as an occasion for triumphalism at the passage of this bill. Anybody who does not understand what has happened to the image of politicians over the last 50 years, I dare say, really does not understand the country that he or she lives in, or they forfeit the right to an audience. The first observation I make about this bill is in its name. And it is a name that 92 years later is preserved. Now, in 1929, the act was called the Prevention of Corruption Act. I think I saw that at Section 24. I haven't seen this bill before today, but yes, Section 24, the Prevention of Corruption Act, Chapter 144 of the Laws of Barbados, and that repeal section extends itself to the Prevention of Corruption Act, which apparently made its way through this assembly and the other assembly, and that also is called the Prevention of Corruption Act. We come here today, and as I said, 92 years later, the name is preserved, the Prevention of Corruption Act. And that language strikes me curiously, and this is not to criticize the draftsman, this is not to criticize he who pilots the bill. I speak objectively, and I speak merely to make observations as to this bill, as to the content of this bill, and the purpose of this bill. The Prevention of Corruption Bill. Now, I wish to invite you Your Honor, to focus on the word prevention. That is a curious word. And that is why I made the opening statement that I made. That the reputation of politicians is on trial. And anyone who does not know that must revisit the thing that they do, the political pursuits that they make on a daily basis. I go back to the word prevention. Now, you don't have to say to a man every morning that he wakes, or you don't have to say to your population, today there is an act of parliament called the Prevention of Murder Act. In other words, you don't anticipate that your population or significant numbers of your population are going to commit murder. So you don't have to say to them, I am passing a law called the Prevention of Murder Act. What the act is called, Your Honor, and you are well steeped in a criminal practice, it is called the Offences Against the Person Act, and it identifies murder as an offense in the event, in the unhappy event that murder takes place. A similar principle with the Sexual Offences Act. You don't have to say to the population by legislation that we are going to prevent you from committing the act of rape. The act simply is called the Sexual Offences Act. And if a person, without the consent of another person, imposes himself on that unfortunate person sexually, he has committed the offense of rape, and it is defined in the statute, and it is defined at common law. And I need not extend the point to the Theft Act, burglary, or robbery. It's called the Theft Act. So that none of that legislation speaks of prevention. It may be a subtle and it may be a delicate point, but it is a point worth noting that this legislation departs from all the other criminal legislation, and it speaks to a preventative quality. Now, why is that so? Is there an anticipation that persons in public life, that politicians will tend to corruption? Is there? It's not my duty to answer the question, but I repeat. The reputations of politicians in this country, in this region, and in this hemisphere have been on trial for a long, long time. Perhaps those who draft this piece of legislation, those who drafted the legislation in 1929, knew this. And why is that so? Now, we can say that there are two schools of thought. We may say that persons come into public life with a predisposition to corruption. And let us agree to call that the behavioralist school, an individual propensity, a proclivity to wrongdoing. Persons who come with their own unique character deficits. Or there may be the structural school, the recognition that the political pursuit, when successful, places persons who occupy high office. Not only does the pursuit place them in high office, but it places them in office that is powerful. And where there's power, there's often the temptation to abuse that power. So we depart from the behavioralist school and we go to the structuralist school. And that is why the legislation has tended over the last 92 plus years, perhaps, not only to have been drafted, and I heard a member talking about the shifting burden of proof. And that is interesting. Not only to have been drafted in the way that it is drafted, but even the name probably anticipates legal, and may I say moral infraction among the participants in this enterprise that the public expects to be a noble enterprise. And I repeat, those who are not aware of that forfeit their right to an audience. That is the reality. And none of us involved in politics can seek exemption from the suspicion that we may have a predisposition to corrupt acts, either because of an individual character deficit or as a result of the occupation of high office, which is also powerful. Why don't we accept that? Why don't we accept that? I want to suggest to you, Your Honor, that the time has come to accept the reality of our image as politicians, and not only the image, but the content that we bring to this noble profession. Whether it is about proclivity or whether it is about power, we have a duty, a high social duty, to meet the public and to say to the public, we pass this legislation with the comfort that there will never be any infringement by any member of this government, of this parliament, except, and happily, the suspicion remains. On the 12th of October, 2021, the suspicion remains. And therefore, I applaud those who have sought to broaden the legislation and to bring this legislation with haste, so that the public shall no longer anticipate infraction, so that the draftsman may no longer have to say, I am going to prevent you, but so that we say, we give a guarantee to our public that there will be probity in the affairs, the public affairs of this country. Let us, therefore, Your Honor, impress the public that we are, one, not predisposed by character deficit to corruption. Let us satisfy the public that we do not incline to the abuse of power. Luke 12:48. Permit me to do this, sir. Among Christians is still very relevant, and that's the term, that is the Bible verse that normally finds application in these circumstances. A lot of people quote it and don't even know it is scriptural. I take you, Your Honor, to the New International Version, which speaks with more modern usage, and I'll be brief, and I quote, "But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." What Luke 24:48 is doing, it divides itself into three categories. It refers to three categories of person. The first category, I think, speaks to minor offenders, because it says, he who does not know but does things deserving of punishment will be beaten with few blows. So the penalty is light. So let us apply that to the what we call the petty criminal, the person who infringes and receives a light sentence. So even the scriptures divide themselves as to the question of penalties. There's a second category of person, but permit me to come to that second category last. The third category, I think, applies to us in public life. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. The operative word there, entrusted. The word trust looms large. We occupy a calling at the heart of which is trust. And every minute of every day, we must satisfy the public that we are worthy of trust. That is the standard that we must reach. That is the scriptural standard, and that is the standard of all legislation, all anti-corruption legislation throughout this hemisphere. We must come with that trust. We must deserve that trust. And I've heard my colleagues today, we must leave this place, when finally we leave this place, with that trust intact, and with our reputations for integrity intact. But I want to come to the second category, because the public holds politicians to a very high standard. But as I've said before, even the legislation anticipates that there comes an occasion when we fall from that standard. But God help us, we must maintain that standard. But the standard should apply not only to politicians. Here is Luke speaking again. Luke 12:48. What is interesting about Luke, for those who have not read the scriptures, Luke occupies about 1/3 of the New Testament. 28% around there of the New Testament. The authorship of Luke, in spite of the name, is not settled. People believe that Luke wrote it and Luke a physician, but that is not settled. But let us go to the main point. Let us go to the main point. That second category of person, it says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. Now I was so reassured to hear not one, but two, perhaps three of my colleagues in here today refer to persons other than persons in public life, other than public officials, other than politicians. I was so reassured that what I intended to say may have not only support, but it may well be accepted by some of my colleagues. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. Every month, people in this country give a lot to utility companies. They demand it, and they receive it. And there are times when they don't receive it. And we all know what they do. An envelope comes with red, urgent. Many householders in this country tremble when that red envelope comes with the words urgent on it. You tremble, and you hold it for a day, and you hold it for 2 days, and you hold it for 3 days, and you're hoping against hope that you will be able to open that envelope that says urgent, and that you will be able to meet the demand of the utility company. It is not for me to reflect on the merits of what that utility company has done recently. Not for me to reflect on that. But every rational human in this country understands that the timing is wrong. That you come to a country at this time that is economically on its knees, where people are suffering, where people are struggling, and you produce a full-page ad. If anybody is uncomfortable, I'm sorry. The people must have a voice in here. And you come with a large newspaper ad with the seductive corporate language that you're seeking an adjustment. What adjustment? I began on the niceties and the delicacies and the subtleties of language. And that is in keeping with those delicacies of language an adjustment. And when you go to the fine print, Your Honor, the word increase appears for the first time. They're not seeking any adjustment. The people of Barbados understand that they're seeking an increase at a time like this. Can they hold the light of morality up against their actions? Or will we say that this is power abused at a time like this? When this country, I repeat, Your Honor, is on its knees. There are people who can't pay an electricity bill tonight, and they can't pay it tomorrow morning, and chances are they can't pay it next week, because food comes first for the 3 children running through the house. And we have come to this country, and they have come to this country. Anybody that is afraid, leave. I will not cease to say this. I will not cease to be a voice on behalf of the people of this country, rich or poor. This must be said. Let them prove that there's a light of morality guiding their action. Let them prove that they are exercising power justly. I cannot reflect on the merit of their case, but I know that coming at a time like this, it is wrong. So let us, those of us in public life, pledge to this country that we shall be standard bearers for decency, honesty, and courage in the conduct of our affairs, because too many of us are afraid to confront overwhelming corporate power. Too many of us. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the conquest of fear. So those who are afraid to speak, and to speak truth to power, tell them, you haven't abandoned fear. You are conquering fear. And just as we are held in this country as politicians and public officials to high standards, we have the moral right tonight. I sat here the whole day into the night to say this. We have the moral right to say this to persons of corporate power, of large corporate power. We have that right to say it to them as well. And therefore, if this bill does anything to restore to this country public trust in public officials and in politicians, let that public trust extend to our corporate partners. You hear the word, sir? Partners. Because there must be a partnership between government and large corporations in this country. Indeed, there are those who say that government is itself a large corporation. It's one of the richest corporations, if you want to say that, sir. It raises millions on millions by taxation. It influences people's access to education, to health, to housing, and to public amenities. So government is indeed a large and powerful corporation. But it is not the only one. And as far as I'm aware, government's motive is never profit. Government's motive is to provide a society that is socially happy. Government's motive is to ensure that there's the rule of law. And you don't speak about law unless you speak about justice. And government's role is a preservation of justice in this country. And I wish to be able to say, as part of a parliamentary government, that we have the cooperation of the private sector, and to move them morally, to sway them morally, and to say to them that at a time like this, this is not the time. I heard a debate in here a few weeks ago, and the phrase was repeated, there is never the time is never wrong or the time is never right to do the right thing, something like that. Those who pervade that in here. Thank you very much. Never the wrong time to do the right thing. Thank you. I say, this is the wrong time for those with light, for those who generate light, and for those who have power. This is the wrong time for them to do what they are intending to do to the rich and the poor in this country. Because not only does electricity drive the smallest bulbs in the smallest chattel houses, it drives the energy in large factories, large industries. This is the wrong time. And this is the right time for this legislation. And let the passage of this legislation be a reminder of that bond, that partnership, that the state, that the government, if you wish, must have with the private sector if people in this country are to live happy lives. Your Honor, I support the legislation, and I'm happy to do so. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I am grateful to all of the Chamber for supporting this bill. I'm especially grateful to my colleague, Minister of Home Affairs, who took the trouble to clear what could potentially have been a divisive issue, in fact, a non-existent issue. When I thanked both the Bar and Integrity Barbados and other members of this chamber did the same, it was because we recognize and respect the important role they play and the cooperative way in which we approach this legislation and other pieces of legislation. And I would not want it to go abroad that they took the trouble to research the issues and to make submissions, and that those submissions were not given the attention or the importance of place that they deserve. Mr. Speaker, we've looked at the issue of corruption. The member of the leader of the opposition very generously took us back in history and reminded us of a very painful period where financial misdeeds, I think he was very kind to remind Barbados and this chamber of the fact that of in excess of $1 billion of expenditure, only about 20% went to public tender. The member who just spoke reflected, sir, on the importance of preventing corruption. You see, Mr. Speaker, we can't reach our hands into the past as much as we would like to do that and undo the wrongdoings and misdeeds of the previous administration. But what we can do, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure as best as the law allows that we put a framework and systems in place that will discourage corruption, that will encourage people to operate with a strong degree of decency and financial probity. This legislation, as the member just spoke, points out, looks forward. It looks forward. And I'm confident that as we pull all of our efforts together in terms of a new approach to governance, making our systems work, and putting proper legislative instruments in place to help us to achieve the rooting out of corruption, sir, that we will have today begun the process, the important work of putting a strong and firm foundation in place for future generations of Barbadians. I'm aware that other members of the chamber would have loved to have weighed in on this subject, and I thank them for cooperating with us. It has never been our intention, Mr. Speaker, to spend overly long a period in this chamber. We've put a lot of effort into making sure members can join virtually, and I'm especially grateful that so many of them turned out today, given the gravity of what we're debating. But we must be mindful of the fact that we're in a COVID pandemic, and therefore it would be unwise of us to send a wrong signal to Barbadians. And therefore I appreciate the cooperation that those members have shown us. Mr. Speaker, thank members for their support, but the journey has now begun. We now have a long way to go in order to bring Barbados' reputation back to where it used to be. I beg to move, therefore, yet again, that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Madam Chair, Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 through 3 stand part.
Question is that Part 1, clauses 1 through 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 to 13.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 4 through 13 stand part.
Question is that Part 2, clauses 4 to 13 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 14 to 16.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 14 to 16 stand part.
Question is that Part 3, clauses 14 to 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 17 to 19.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 17 to 19 stand part.
Question is that Part 4, clauses 17 to 19 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 20 to 24.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, being clauses 20 to 24, stand part.
Question is that Clause 5, clauses 20 to 24 stand part.
Part 5.
Pardon?
Part 5, not clause. Part 5.
Part 5. It sounded like clause. Part 5, clauses 20 to 24 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Prevention of Corruption Act 2021.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
But consequent on the, you would probably just want to say that the speaker having given notice of the joint nomination, it is reported of nature.
With that, Mr. Speaker, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I beg to move the adjournment of this sitting until Wednesday, the 20th of October at 10 a.m. Mr. Speaker, I believe you've been already given notice of the joint sitting of both houses of Parliament. And on that occasion, we will meet with both houses to deal with the issue related to the appointment of the President of Barbados.
Before we adjourn for the 20th, I wish to inform this Honourable Chamber that the sitting on the 20th would be at the Lord Erskine Sandiford Centre, which will then see the nomination for the President of the Republic of this country, for the election of the President of this fair land. And that should be at 10 o'clock in the forenoon. The question is that this Honourable Chamber be adjourned until the 20th day of October 2021 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until the 20th day of October 2021 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.